mental health, and human rights, discussing historical perspectives, current challenges, and the role of advocacy. We have an incredible lineup of speakers and, of course, our president being one. I know you are seeing our president online, Sister Tisha Clark Griffiths, who will share their insights and experiences. And I encourage all of you to engage actively in this conversation. And I want to thank you for being here to participate in this important dialogue. Let me just, for those who are online, so that you are aware of our presenters, we have with us, outside of our president, we have Dr. Judith Liber Thomas, who is from the Ministry of Health and Wellness in Jamaica. We have Mrs. Karen Grant Simmons from the Bermuda Public Services Union. I was just looking. We have Mrs. Camille Bennett Campbell, who is an attorney at law, who specializes in occupational safety and health matters. And we have our brother Dean Flores, who is president of the Belize Public Services Union, with us. And one who will join us soon is Miss Jillian Corrodus, former second vice president and also director at the Ministry of Labor and Social Security. So a lot of you are online and you have an interest because you really want to know, what is mental health? What is the trade union movement doing? What are other key stakeholders doing to address the issues, the disparities, the discrimination, the perceived biases surrounding this global topic? It is interesting that we would have selected the presenters that we will hear from today, because we believe that a collaborative effort in treating with these instances or situation will be necessary. And so what we want to aim towards is to ensure that coming out of this session, we can have not just dialogue with other stakeholders, but move towards driving policy and having policy implementations that will ensure that the rights of workers are protected and generally the rights of society are protected, because we link this topic as a human rights issue. So I do hope that you will be excited and intrigued, and of course, that we will pique your interest as we listen to the discussions throughout this afternoon on this current and vital topic. Thank you for being here to participate in the dialogue, and we want to cultivate a better understanding and advocate for change in our mental health system. So let's get started. And I now want to, I'm just looking if we have Ms. Corrodus online. Should be our first speaker. She's not yet on with us. Once I get the prompt, I will advise. So I would now want for us to welcome Mrs. Melanie Mullins-Arnold, who is our honorary treasurer, who will present to us our president. Thereafter, our president will speak. Mrs. Mullins-Arnold, I now invite you to the virtual lectern. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, host, for allowing me to unmute. Good afternoon, all. Is everyone hearing me?
Loud and clear.
Great, thank you so much.
Yes, we are.
The task is mine to introduce to us the president of the Jamaica Civil Service Association, Mrs. Tisha Clark Griffiths, who became the 17th president of the Jamaica Civil Service Association, the JCSA, on May 26, 2023. The first female to hold this position in 104 years. Prior to assuming her role as president, she was the first vice president of the JCSA, a position she held for 5 years. She is a trained strategic planner with 27 years of excellence and experience in the public sector. A consummate professional with high ambitions, Mrs. Tisha Clark Griffiths has certification in strategic planning, public sector management, and holds a master's degree in business administration from the University of East London, where she focused on industrial relations practices in the public sector. She now serves as the only female vice president of the Jamaica Confederation of Trade Unions, JCTU, and also sits on the board of the JCS Housing Company Limited, as well as the JCSA Limited. Additionally, she was recently appointed as a member of the Board of Management Institute of National Development, MIND. Since 2019, Mrs. Clark Griffiths has been a woman's advocate representing the JCSA at the Public Service International, PSI, and the Caribbean Public Services Association, CPSA, on matters affecting women in the public sector. Mrs. Tisha Clark Griffiths is married to Andre, and she's the mother of 2 sons. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome to the virtual lectern our president, Mrs. Tisha Clark Griffiths.
Thank you very much, Madam Treasurer. Good afternoon, everyone joining us from far and near, and those who joined us online on this very important day discussing this very important topic, the topic of mental health, because mental health matters. I want to take this opportunity to thank the team for organizing this session. I mean, I was very, very elated to hear that it is happening even before we conclude our year and going into our Christmas season. I also want to take this opportunity to thank our presenters and our General Secretary or moderator, Dr. Judith Liber, Thomas, Mrs. Camille Bennett Campbell, Brother Dean Flores, Mrs. Karen Grant Simmons, who I would have witnessed and participated in her presentation in Bermuda some time ago and is an excellent advocate on this topic. Ms. Jillian Corrodus from the Ministry of Labor, officers online, first VP, I'm not sure if he's on, second VP, third VP, my members and prospective members, thank you for taking the opportunity to join us today. I'm going to ask if my presentation can be shared so that in the event that you need to write anything down, you have the opportunity to do so, or also to screenshot whatever you want to take away from this. I'm thankful for the opportunity to speak on this matter because I've had personal experiences in my own life on this mental health issue, particularly in relation to my brother who had mental health issues and was murdered 10 years ago while I was at a retreat in Trelawney, which is in Jamaica, Trelawney, JCSA retreat. And that has had a lasting impact on me since for the last 10 years. Interestingly, this year I attended the Ministry of Health and Wellness. They had a function to recognize persons with mental health at the Kingston Public Hospital. And I managed to participate in the events that they had there. And it brought back some traumatizing memory about my brother. And I recognize that it doesn't take anything for you to go back in time to relive certain experiences. And so as we look at mental health and promoting and protecting and human rights, today I will be talking to you about addressing workers' workplace challenges and the role that the JCSA is playing in dealing with mental health in the public sector. I am not a professional, so I do not have a professional definition, and I'm sure that Mrs. Karen Simmons and Dr. Judith Liber Thomas they're going to provide you with the definitions that are legally acceptable. But in my own research, I have done my part in looking at mental health and what exactly is mental health. One definition of mental health is a state of well-being, enabling individuals to cope with life's challenges. And aren't we struggling with challenges? I can tell you that just the change in the compensation restructuring have impacted persons mentally, right? And mental health in the workplace is both a stressor, and we need support systems in the workplace. What is the relevance of the JCSA in all of this? What is the JCSA doing? And essentially what we're doing is advocating for workers' rights, which include mental health protection as a key pillar. And I want to discuss with you the JCSA experience. So since I became president last year, I had some experiences that is worth sharing. I had the opportunity to got involved in a case involving a former member of a member of the JCSA and someone who was Civil Servant of the Year. And there was an incident involving this individual, and it really affected her mental health to the point where persons start discriminating against her, calling her mad. And I reached out to a number of persons in her organization as well as outside of our organization, because this is an exceptional individual. And I recognized that there was some deep-rooted issues that has caused her to reach to the point where it has impacted her mentally. That for me was it was disheartening to know that the workplace did not see that it really is a cry for help in some circumstances. I've also had the opportunity to interact with other members whose cases have been brought before the JCSA. And the cases that came to the JCSA, when examined, we recognize that these people are not all bad. These persons are just going through life challenges and just require some additional support. They're not necessarily it's not intentional for them to get into arguments and involving disciplinary issues and industrial relation issues. It is because of the circumstances and their experiences and their current situation. At one point, there was this person that I knew of that was really, she lost her fiance. Her mother had cancer. She had to wake up and get to work by X time. She was late for work. She was brought up for disciplinary matters. And I don't think persons took the time to really find out what was really happening. And sometimes, colleagues, we are not confidential enough, so persons are afraid to share some of those experiences. So I have had the opportunity to understand and to not discriminate against those persons who display some types of behavior that might not be normal. Now, mental health challenges in the workplace. What are some of the common challenges? One, stigma. Employees fear judgment or repercussions for disclosing mental health issues. The workplace is not a place that really facilitates discussions, and so persons are afraid to express themselves. In fact, I was looking at a research that says over 20 million persons experience mental health issues, and over 50% of them are afraid to come and express that to persons because of stigmatization and fear. The second thing that I want to look at as a challenge is high workload and lack of support, poor communication, and occupational hazard. Now, we know that some of us have heavy workload and it impacts our mental health, and we don't really get the support that we really need. We don't even know how to communicate what is happening to us. And if we do communicate what is happening to us, what is communicated back to us is not something that we really expect, right? And from some of the persons that we thought would have reached out to us and to provide that support, we don't get that. The third thing is discrimination. Limited accommodations for mental health conditions. And we do have persons who have discriminated against persons. And one of the things that I had to deal with my own brother was persons in my community who would describe him as the mad boy around there, so forth and so on, which when he is back to his normal self would bring that strain and that depression on him. And even the facilities that we have here in Jamaica, and of course, Bellevue Hospital is one of those institutions that have done exceptionally well over the many years in treating mental health issues. And the CEO down there is doing a very, very good job. Then we look at the issue of burnout, emotional exhaustion from chronic workplace stress. We know that some of us have burnout. We know that some persons are overworked and some persons feel overworked and underpaid. Then when it is that we are going through these challenges, then there's limited access to these resources. Where do we go for help? Few workplaces provide mental health resources. I know when I just came in the service, I used to hear about this lady at the Ministry of Finance named Miss Grasset. She was the person dealing with all the issues in the public service. I don't know if there are enough places. I don't know if there are enough people in the government service that treat with that matter. I still think that there is limited access to resources. As a matter of fact, most of my members would not feel comfortable going into the Ministry of Finance. The fact that you enter those departments means that you are having some mental challenges. So persons are not going to go. Now, it would be better for them to develop and to establish other partnerships where persons can feel free to go to these centers for attention if the needs arise. Now, the impact of mental health challenges on employees. One, we have decreased productivity and job satisfaction. So persons are not producing as optimum as they should. You have increased absenteeism and turnover. Persons leave, persons resign, they don't feel motivated to come to work. High risk of workplace conflicts and discrimination by employees, your own peers, as well as your employer. I can relate to an incident that involves an incident that happened in one of the local authorities. In one of the local authorities, where a young lady was having a mental breakdown, and the person reached out to me to say, what is it that I'm supposed to do, because I don't know what to do. The person is behaving boisterous. A lot of persons in the workplace don't even know how to console, how to reach out to the person, because we are not taught out to do so with that have issues to have training and development programs. Now, on the employers, you're going to have lower productivity, lower organization performance. Then there's going to be increased cost in healthcare and staff turnover, because now you're going to have to be replacing persons over and over. And where there are disputes, you're going to have increasing disputes, and some of them may eventually result in legal disputes as well. Now, what is the JCSA role in promoting mental health? One, representation, advocacy, and support. So advocacy for members' rights to mental health accommodation. And of course, we all know that there's a need for a revision of the labor laws to include mental health issues, ensure inclusion of mental health policies in our workplaces. That is something that we need to advocate for. We need to forge partnerships with organizations like the Ministry of Health and Wellness and other organizations that deals with mental health issues. JCSA also have to conduct training and awareness, training and public education around the issue. And this forum is one of those that we are using to share the information, conducting workshops on these matters of mental illness, and train our union representative to support our members that are facing mental challenges, mental health challenges. We have that responsibility to do so. Now, JCSA wants to assist our members, and we want to be able to push for workplace policies to support our members. We want to be able to partner with mental health professionals to offer subsidized counseling for our members. That's what we want to do. And we know that the cost of these things are exorbitant. These trainings these professionals are professionals that offer these training, but you have to pay for it. But we have to find a way to put some funding together to facilitate persons who really come to us for help. We want to establish peer groups for employees to share their experiences. And the Men's Coalition is one forum where men can come and speak about matters. We do have a Men's Coalition group, and we have the Women's Action Committee. Essentially what we are looking for is a safe space for persons to come and voice their what they're going through without being discriminated against. We have to accommodate these persons. We have to advocate for flexi work arrangement for them, so that then when they have these type of meltdown, that they can come in at a certain time, etc., into the workplace, and we can find a way to organize around these to prevent them from getting worse or having burnouts. We have to have education sessions in the various workplaces, and this will help to alleviate some of these issues as well. The JCSA has a lot to accomplish, and we are doing what we can do at the moment, but we have future plans as well, right? Now, we have internal challenges. One, insufficient fund for mental health programs. We haven't seen that in the ministries. We have not seen that in the Ministry of Finance. Lack of trained personnel to address mental health in the workplace. Those are challenges. Resistance from employees to implement mental health accommodation, and employees who don't want to participate even if they are going through those mental health challenges. So we have those internal challenges and as well as external challenges that we face. Now, what can the recommendations for employers? One, implement wellness programs, offer mandatory training for managers on recognizing and addressing mental health. We want to provide accommodation for employees, such as flexible work arrangements. And those are some of the things that employers can do, as well as advocate for policies to be implemented in the workplace to protect persons that have mental health breakdowns. The JCSA will continue to advocate for the government policies that protects workers' mental health and mental health rights. We want to lobby for national mental health programs specifically for public service employees, and we want to offer support for members affected by workplace challenges. We are a mega deal union, and we have to go beyond just industrial relations. Now, the labor law, Sister Jillian is on, and she probably can help us in understanding where do we need to change in the laws, or what laws need to be amended to facilitate an upgrading of our laws in Jamaica to address contemporary challenges faced by workers, including mental health challenges. So she can also provide some support there. What are the future plans that we have? One, we continue to advocate for our members by including in our collective bargaining agreement some of these things that I spoke about earlier. We have to highlight examples where the JCSA would have successfully addressed members who would have been impacted by mental health issues. We have to establish a mental health unit, probably in the JCSA or in another institution that our members can go to get assistance. We do have a number of members who from time to time have these needs, and we have to provide a way to partner with other persons to have them go there and have the conversations and to have those needs addressed. We may need to introduce a hotline for mental health support to our members, and those are future plans that we have in the JCSA. So one of the things that we want you to remember, colleagues, is that, mental health is a fundamental human right that requires protection in the workplace. As part of our collective bargaining, we need to include, in this year's collective bargaining, I've already included a mental health day for public servants, and I'm going to push and advocate strongly for that. We have to ensure that we continue to have public education sessions like these, and we have a vital role to play in advocating for members and providing that support system to them. We have to collaborate with other unions, employers, policymakers, and stakeholders in this critical to have success if it is that we need to be successful in tackling this very important issue. And there is a call for action. We have to encourage members to utilize JCSA resources actively and participate in mental health initiatives. Look at it. We have circulated this forum to a lot of our members, and we have 59 persons online. Why do we have 59 persons online? Because persons don't think it is important for them to join. We need to educate and to have our members participate in forums like these where information is shared and they can utilize this information to assist them and their relatives in the event that they encounter persons with mental illnesses. We are not doctors, we are not psychiatrists, psychologists, but we can identify when something is off with our colleagues, our members, etc. Encourage our members to utilize resources and actively participate. So as I close, I want you to manage the mental health in your respective workplace. Know what you do, develop a good routine, check on your physical health and your mental health, stay organized in your respective place of work, reward yourself sometimes, give yourself some grace, colleagues, take some time for yourself. I know some of us in the government service, we don't think that we need to take leave. Take your vacation leave, and the leave that is allocated to you, it is because you need to take a break from work so that you can rejuvenate yourselves and come back refreshed in the environment. Use resources available to you. Surround yourselves with positive people. Speak positivity in your life all the time, and maintain a stable and organized work environment wherever possible. Be gracious to yourself. Don't be too hard on yourself. Take every day, one day at a time. Do not take on everything one time, and just be humble about it. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for listening to me. And at this time, if you have a question, I will take it. Over to you, Madam Moderator.
Thank you so very much, President Clark Griffiths, for your very informative and inspirational presentation. I know this would have sparked some interest amongst those listening online. I do note from your key takeaway, Madam President, where you have indicated, and rightly so, that mental health is a fundamental human right that requires the protection of workers in the workplace. And interestingly, this is where we need to have collaboration with the union and other key stakeholders, civil society or state agencies, in ensuring that the fundamental rights of workers is targeted and assured. You would have also indicated some call to action, and this is also interesting. You encourage members to utilize the Jamaica Civil Service Association, and we do have other members from the Caribbean region. So unions in general, we want members to utilize their union resources and to actively participate in mental health initiatives. So I would want to, before we go into question and answers, I'm just going to ask persons to just hold their point, and we take the other presenter, Miss Jillian Corrodus, presentation, as she has another engagement. So Sister Carol and others, I do note your hands have been up. I'm just asking if you could just hold your question and answer for after the next presenter, and then we will take those questions. So before Mrs. Melanie Mullen-Arnolds introduces our next presenter, I just want to say that we have with us our former second vice president and someone who is also a distinguished guru in industrial relations and allied services within the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, Ms. Jillian Corrodus. And we will take Ms. Corrodus's presentation after she has been introduced by Mrs. Mullins-Arnold. So over to you, Mrs. Mullins-Arnold, and let me thank our president for her very informative presentation. Over to you, Madam Treasurer.
Ms. Jillian Corrodus has served the public sector for over 26 years. Her first assignment began in the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, where she was appointed as a labor officer. She subsequently transitioned to several other ministries and departments of the government of Jamaica. 21 years after joining the public sector, she returned to head the division of the Ministry of Labor with responsibility for industrial relations and allied services. She presently has oversight for all industrial disputes reported to the Ministry of Labor and Social Security for its intervention, as well as efforts to eliminate child labor, licensing of employment agencies, also local and overseas employment programs operated by the ministry. Her keen interest in industrial relations has led her to serve over 15 years in academia, lecturing and developing curricula in the field of labor relations. She has trained representatives of over 700 public and private sector entities. She has extensive training from the Industrial Labor Organization, ILO, in contemporary labor relations. Jillian has literally sat on all sides of the tripartite bargaining table, having been a trade union vice president and also an employer representative. She comes with first-hand knowledge and presents a balanced perspective on employment, labor relations, and the changing world of work. Ladies and gentlemen, members, prospective members, please help me welcome to the virtual lectern, Miss Jillian Corrodus.
Oh, thank you very much, Sister Melanie. Thank you very much, Sister Tiffany, Sister President Tisha. Thank you so much. Members and prospective members, I think you're at the right place. The Jamaica Civil Service Association is doing very well for its membership, and I want to just personally commend the leadership of the Jamaica Civil Service Association. I think the union is in good hands, and I hope you agree with me. The topic of mental health is one of those topics that is not spoken about as often as it should. And because of that, even though I am
Just a minute. We're trying to reach out to Ms. Corrodus, please.
technology is trying to stand between us, but we will continue. All right, please. Moderator, can you give a signal, or someone can you give a signal if you're hearing, please?
Go ahead, Ms. Corrodus.
Okay, it's better?
It's much better.
I am going to proceed nevertheless, because this is a very important discussion. And as we speak about the organizational intervention that is required where mental health is concerned, I want to start by saying that the workforce comes from society. And we have to recognize that mental health is one of those issues that is lesser spoken about, but affects so many persons. And mental health, in some cases, have its origin from persons who are children, in some instances, schizophrenia, depression, lots of different variations of causative reasons for mental health, sometimes begins in childhood. And as organizations, and certainly as a public service, we need to recognize that these children are transitioned to become workers of today. And therefore, we have to recognize that the issue of mental health should not be one that is treated with disdain, one that is treated as if persons are not equal participants in the world of work. And therefore, we need to recognize that as organizations, and certainly Jamaica, being a member state of the international organization that recognizes the importance of an inclusive work environment, persons with disabilities, persons with mental health challenges may be classified as part of the vulnerable in our workplace. What does that mean for organizations? It means that the employer has a role in ensuring there are programs to support the mental health of its workers. And you notice that I would have spoken about mental health from the clinical definition first. And therefore, we as organizations have to ensure that there are strong programs of support, that at the level of each organization, each department, people not only know that there are programs, but people understand what the programs are, and quite importantly, that they know how to access these programs. There's oftentimes notion that, oh, there are programs in place, but let us think about it. Are people aware of these programs? And more importantly, as I keep saying, do they know how to access help? Now, autistic children become adults. Have we stopped to think that some persons who have had a disability, diagnosed disability, will need different standards of work in terms of their targets, in terms of their work performance monitoring, their work performance evaluation? Have we just taken a broad brush approach to performance evaluation, for instance? Does the government's PMAS system recognize that people function at different ability levels? I believe that the Jamaica Civil Service Association, with this kind of session, it is timely to take some recommendations, including a special recognition of the abilities of persons and the need to evaluate them based on their abilities, rather than a general pool, a general approach to evaluating persons, especially with mental disabilities and other disabilities. Now, as we speak about mental health, there are persons who, for some reason that is explained by their circumstances, find themselves in depression. It could be work-related, it could be family-related, social-related, or just connected to just anything that they find to be worrisome, bothersome. And this kind of stress, depression, is, sometimes people say, oh, it's not my business, I don't want to get involved in it. But what is the role of the organization? When I say organization, an organization is not just the employer. It is the staff within it. What is your role to your fellow member of staff? What is your role? And I know that in Jamaica, we carry people business, and that is not what I'm speaking about. But how do you identify someone who may need some professional intervention or some additional support? It may not be professional intervention, but additional support. We have to recognize that we have to have systems that are both top-down, as I mentioned, from the organization perspective in terms of the structures to deal with mental health and persons with mental health, but also we need to have a bottom-up approach. Staff members and the Jamaica Civil Service Association, I'm suggesting through your departmental representatives, this is a good avenue for them to give support, to recognize their peers that are having certain challenges, and to provide to them information that will assist them in managing these mental health challenges. When we speak about mental health, we have to now look at, is there proper provision for persons? I recall many years ago, I worked in a government body. It was really just a temporary summer engagement, but there was a colleague who was just employed to be permanent, and after taking her medication, she became drowsy. But how was that viewed? It was viewed as quote unquote laziness, and unfortunately she was terminated from employment. Now let us dissect that. What does that do to her? How does that worker reintegrate themselves? Because what you're having is now a gap on that person's resume, that person's CV, a gap that is normally asked, why were you out of the world of work? And what we are seeing from an example like this is that we have systems in place, but are supervisors really trained to identify? Do they know how to properly interrogate or investigate these issues? Because had an investigation happened, perhaps they would have had a disclosure that there is a challenge and to help her manage that particular challenge. Because it doesn't mean that she's not able, but it means that she needs a special arrangement to ensure that she is in her best health. And when we speak about mental health, there are so many persons who suffer quietly in the different organizations and even in the public service. Persons who have been working in the public service for 10, 20 years. They can't get appointed because they have not been able to meet the requirements for an appointment. However, we have to have some system in place to evaluate these persons based on the challenges that we know they have. And if we are really truly going to have an inclusive world of work or workplace or organization, we have to make space for the evaluation of these persons in a way that gives them the opportunity to shine despite the challenges that they may face. So I know that I've said quite a bit. I was late in coming on, so I will hold for any other questions that may come, moderator. But I just wanted to tease the platform to say that mental health challenges in our organization is everybody's business. It is not just the employer, it is the employee's business to help their peers, their colleagues, to be in their best health. And also, it is the business of a trade union like the Jamaica Civil Service Association. And I see that's the reason you're having this kind of conversation on the platform today. And you're commended for this intervention. Thank you very much, moderator.
Very well said, Sister Jillian. I'm loving the conversations thus far. And just to do a bit of backtrack in terms of our two presenters. So our president would have spoken about the advocacy of the union and basically what the union has been doing in terms of placing this type of issue in our CBAs, that's our collective bargaining agreements. She also spoke about the collaboration with the employer and the future plans that JCSA has in store with regards to not just our members, because what we do will ultimately impact the wider community, the wider society. So indeed, the association recognizes the need for this matter to be addressed. And then when we listen to the conversation put forward by Sister Jillian, she moved right into how we really create a culture of care. You know, I like the takeaway where Sister Jillian stated that mental health challenges is everybody's business. And that is so very true. And this leads me to, think about how do we do some deeper work? How do we delve into the steps that unions in general can take to foster a culture of care and support, particularly regarding mental health and human rights in the workplace? So I will now open the floor for persons who wish to raise questions. I know I do have the two presenters online, and they're willing, ready, and able to take these questions. So I see a hand, which I will now take. And Sister Helen, if I miss any, I'm just asking you to guide me. I have Sister Carol Clark, whose hand would have been up for quite some time. Sister Carol, I will now invite you to unmute. And before you do, Sister Carol, let me just thank our two presenters, our president, Tisha Clark Griffiths, and Sister Jillian Corrodus, for taking the time out of their busy schedule to, be a part of this very informative and deliberate session, because we are moving towards collaboration with all key stakeholders in ensuring that mental health remains everybody's business. So I see Sister Carol and I see our President, Tisha Clark Griffith. Sister Carol, you first. You had your hand up for quite some time. You can unmute. Sister Carol, we're not hearing.
You're hearing me now?
Yes, I'm hearing you now. You may go ahead.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Madam President and team, I must congratulate you on this session. So far, it's very good, very good. However, my question is to both Madam President and Sister Corrodus. How do we recognize when someone is mentally challenged? How do we in the workplace recognize that?
All right, that's the one question, Sister Carol.
That's one part. And
President, you want to go first or you want me to go?
President, do you want to go first, or can we have Sister Jillian going first? All right, Sister Jillian,
I'm not able to unmute. I'm trying to unmute, but
you're
I'm not
trying
getting.
to.
Oh yes, I'm unmuted now.
Go ahead. I'm hearing you.
Yes. So before I answer Carol's question, I wanted to make a point that Jillian, a very, very important point that Jillian raised. And the point is that persons are stigmatized and the disciplinary matters are brought against them, grievances, because they have certain behavioral issues. And as I said in my presentation, a lot of times it's not because the persons are bad, it's because they're going through a particular challenge. And it goes right back into Sister Carol's question about identifying it. We don't have the expertise, but we know our colleagues, we know when something is off. We have to be able to identify that. But with that, we also need to educate and train. We have to join expertise to provide us with signs and signals how to identify where our colleagues these symptoms are. We identify behavioral changes in our colleagues, because we can, if it is that we work alongside persons, we'll be able to say to somebody, something is not right with Tisha today. I wonder if she's okay. And it is okay not to be okay on some days. But the problem is that when persons have breakdowns and have mental health challenges, because we don't know what is happening, as in the case of the lady who fell asleep because of our medication, we went ahead and started to say things about persons. So what this is showing us is that we need to educate ourselves, as well as the union will be able to collaborate with entities to provide that training. And we will start with departmental representative as part of our future plans to identify persons in our various spaces that have challenges, and so that we can tap into and reach out as early as we can. So that's my feedback.
Thank you, Madam President. Sister Jillian, you may go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Sister Tiffany. And I just want to add that persons go through mental health challenges. Sometimes it is temporary in nature, and sometimes it is related to things like trauma and so. So you find that persons will have a death in their family, whether tragic or otherwise, and for a while they're going through something. People say, oh, get over it. We have to recognize that the mental health of people are very important, and it is not okay to just discount or dismiss the views and feelings of persons. And good mental health depends on us respecting those feelings and views of persons. So we have a lot of persons in the workplace who go through trauma, and trauma can be a robbery. We have to recognize that these instances of trauma sometimes lead people to have challenges in terms of their mental health. Sometimes there's a phobia for things, and it may be a temporary situation. However, it is very important for us to identify that something is wrong and to offer some kind of assistance. Now, normally we see mental health looking like behavior change, as Sister President said. And also, quite importantly, we see it in terms of poor performance. People just are not meeting their expectations in terms of their work delivery. There's frequent absenteeism, lackadaisical approach towards work. Depression. Depression is something that sometimes it's hard to identify. Depression, sometimes you see persons looking depressed in terms of how they carry themselves, their dress, their physical appearance, and so. But depression is
I believe Sister Jillian, she's having
I think we lost
challenges.
her. I think we lost her, Jess, for a minute.
I think she will come back on. Her mic is still on mute, but it's the connection.
Madam Chair.
I'm hearing a voice. I'm not sure.
Sister Carol I think it's Sister Carol who is speaking.
Sister Carol?
Yes, ma'am. The second part of my question, you see, is we work together. We're colleagues. We work together. What if we can't identify what is happening while something else is happening at home, but at work, everybody's okay. But then you hear of something outside of work. We leave work quite okay today, and tomorrow you hear of something sad and everybody's saying, huh?
Guess what, Sister Carol? We have the
Yes.
experts online. We have other presenters who will definitely hit those key points in terms of those questions that you ask. I believe our next presenter, Dr. Judith Liber, will be aptly able to present and provide some guidance as we go throughout the session. So I just want you to hold your point and let us hear what the other presenters have to say, and I think everything will tie in. But before I just go ahead, and I do want to just share, because again, I think we're hitting the right points, because my colleagues and I would have just recently had an experience in Colombia for a conference that we attended. And, when I heard Sister Jillian spoke about some of those nuances and some of those trigger points, oh, get over it. It is not okay to discount or dismiss the views and feelings of persons. And it takes me back to that point where I spoke earlier about the culture, creating a culture of care. And this is something that we would need to collectively train, even from the level of our shop stewards / departmental representatives and other point persons within the various ministries, departments, agencies, and workplaces in general. That culture of care, those areas that we will see and know how to address someone who is going through a situation. Because oftentimes we're very dismissive of people's feelings, and they have gone or undergone a traumatic experience, but because we do not have that level of skill or expertise or even just general care, we do not understand what it is that they are going through. And without even going too much into the situation. So one of my very good sister would have experienced trauma being stuck in an elevator for close to an hour. And when, they were able to be released, I think persons were very dismissive, oh, well, you're out, everything good now. You can't stop talking about it. But then we do not know what the sisters or what those persons went through. So if we had that level of care, and if we had the skill in terms of identifying, those areas, we would have been more intuitive in terms of being able to share and care for those colleagues. So I think we hit the nail on the head when we say that we should not be dismissive of the views and feelings of persons. I now want to move to our next presenter, who will be addressing us on mental health in the public service, Dr. Judith Liber Thomas. But before we do, I'll ask our treasurer, Sister Melanie Mullins-Arnold, to introduce her. Over to you, Madam Tresh.
Dr. Judith A. Liber is the current director of the Child and Adolescent Mental Health in the Ministry of Health and Wellness. She has more than 20 years experience working in child guidance clinics in Jamaica. Dr. Liber is a pediatrician. She is a child consultant, an adolescent and adult psychiatrist. She is an associate lecturer at the University of the West Indies. Dr. Liber has provided oversight to the development of a protocol entitled Guidelines for Diagnosis and Management of Common Mental Disorders in Children and Adolescents. She is the point person for Ministry of Health and Wellness in the recent introduction of the school mental health literacy curriculum into high schools. Please help me welcome, ladies and gentlemen, guests, our presenter for the moment, Dr. Judith A. Liber.
Are you?
Thank you. Yes.
Okay.
Are you hearing me now?
Yes, you may go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much, Mrs. Mullins-Arnold, and thanks to JCSA for inviting me. I'm gonna, plunge right in. The topic on which I'm going to share is not, oh my gosh, I'm sorry. Just give me a minute here. The Zoom. Why is it not coming up? Oh dear. Maybe I need your Hello, yes, are you seeing my presentation?
You may go ahead. Go ahead.
You are seeing my presentation?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you. All right, so I was kind of given some margin, some leverage with the some freedom regarding the topic. So this is what I chose to speak on. It will be relevant, but it may not be exactly the topic that you had on your agenda. So I'm talking about mental health, trauma, and the workplace. Okay. So the first point I want to make is that a lot of us, when we see children or even adults, behaving in a strange way, we say in our minds, if we don't even say to them, what is wrong with you? What is wrong with you? I'm sure we say that a lot to children, and maybe to adults, we keep it in our minds, right? But as somebody was saying, we don't know what that person has gone through. And we find out that it is more helpful, more instructive to ask, what happened to you? What kind of care did you get? What kind of care did you not get? Some people might say, I never had a mother, or I never had a father, or I had to look after myself from I was age 12 or something like that. And that will give you a better understanding of, why this person may be acting that way. So that is the first thought that I want you to keep in your head. When you see persons behaving, way out of the norm, abnormally, aggressively, what may have happened to them. This is to give you just a brief overview of common mental disorders. And actually, I want to stress that mental health needs to be differentiated from mental disorders. So whenever we say mental health, people go to mental disorders in their mind and they're talking about maybe mad person or mental. And in a way, probably I'm propagating that more by showing you this slide. But I think other presenters may have expounded on what we mean about mental health, and I'm sure you've heard of the term mental well-being. Different people argue about the difference between health and well-being. Well, we in the ministry see well-being as being composed of mental health, spiritual health, physical health, and social health. So it's kind of encompassing all the different arenas in which we, all different areas that we have to pay attention to. But unfortunately, there are those of us, especially in children, I don't know the statistics in adults, but in children, maybe about 10 to 15% of them during the age range of 0 to 17, 18, will have some kind of diagnosis of mental disorders. And I'm just going to run through them. These are usually, genetically based and biologically based. So that means that they had a propensity for this to come on, from birth. And then maybe circumstances along the way may have precipitated it to become evident. I had given the point that even in our child guidance clinics in the 0 to 2 age, we see children who are, let's say 2 to 3, they're not talking and they kind of have some bizarre behaviors. And, you wonder, is this child beginning to show the signs of autism? And I must say that after COVID, because a good amount of our children around that kind of tender age had a lot of screen time and they weren't really interacting with a lot of people. So they do have kind of diminished socialization. And of course, they wouldn't have been talking much to people. So their speech would be delayed. So at this time, we kind of have somewhat of a dilemma to try to figure out, are these children really autistic or on the spectrum, as is more correctly stated, or is it a result of COVID and the screen time and the isolation? So around age 5, your anxiety disorders begin to emerge, and you may not think this, is anything. It's usually the child who maybe cries more than usual at school. When they go to like kindergarten or daycare, they cry longer than usual, and the other kids they cry for a whole month, right? And then sometimes even when they settle down, whenever they're at school and away from their mommy, they're wondering what's happening with their mommy, and if she's late to pick them up, they're worrying about that, right? So these are the kind of more anxious children who may go on to have other anxiety problems, like social anxiety problems, where they are afraid of stand up in front of people and talking or presenting. Around that time too, we have this is an old term, but it's still helpful. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. The children who are very hyperactive, inattentive, very impulsive, and easily distracted, right? And they start emerging around 5. We usually we will watch them for maybe about 2 years before we diagnose them at 7. And sometimes these children, they will come to you and say, the parents will come to you and say he has been expelled from 4 kindergartens or 4 daycare because he's so disruptive. So, and then what's happening now is that a lot of our children, especially with the screen time issue, their ability to pay attention is impaired because they're accustomed to this continuous, exciting, stimulating screen, different images, different colors, lots of movement. So when they go in a regular classroom, sometimes it's difficult for them to pay attention. So that is also giving us some challenge. In fact, one researcher has called it virtual. Well, they call it virtual autism, but we could call it virtual inattention. Just the inattention that has been evoked from all the screen time that we have had. Okay, so unfortunately, when a young girl enters puberty, she's more inclined to become depressed. So we try to put in a question or 2 in the school medical so we can pick up these girls who get depressed. We're not sure why. And the boys, they don't get depressed, but sometimes this is where they start using stuff, alcohol and ganja, right? We don't know. They may be getting depressed, but they're not telling us. And this may be their way of dealing with, like the internal pain that they're having. This is the mood disorder is the depression. And then you have a small percentage who may begin to hear voices or behave very strangely. But they usually try to mask these symptoms. They realize that something is wrong. They realize that they're not quite like their peers. So they mask it and may not get diagnosed for some time until they become more flagrant. What we know is that a lot of the mental disorders, the symptoms actually start before 14, if you notice here. But it takes about 10 years for the symptoms, for them to be properly diagnosed and managed. And so that is why we're stressing child and adolescent mental health, because we want to try to get them to be the best they can be in this period of time. Because in this time, you're supposed to be doing your CSEC, supposed to be doing your CAPE. If you go to vocational school or you're going to college, you're supposed to be doing that too. You may be seeking a partner, having girlfriends, and then you maybe decide to choose a wife at around this time, and you're also trying to set up yourself as an adult, a career, and have a group of friends. So there are a lot of tasks, developmental tasks that we expect in this age group, this age period. And of course, if they are impaired by mental illness, it can really set them back. All right, let me go down here. Okay. All right, so somebody mentioned trauma, and I'm just putting this out there. At the presentation, I mentioned the trauma-informed school. You have the trauma-informed care, which can be given at hospitals, health centers. Let's say somewhere like if you're located in a kind of volatile community, there's a lot of violence. It's logical to assume that people have been, exposed to maybe a lot of dead bodies, shootings, blood, all of that, which may have traumatized them, or some of them may have lost their father or their uncle or whatever, or their brother. So a lot of them would have been traumatized. And so when they present, let's say at a KPH, they're kind of bearing that already. So the staff should be mindful of this and not be aggressive towards them, because they're already kind of bearing that burden. So you can have, as I said, the trauma-informed care. You can talk about hospitals, schools. You're trying to promote healing. Like you're asking the teachers non-judgmental co-regulation, that is helping them to manage their emotions, trying to empower them in terms of managing themselves and accomplishing tasks. If they are not reading or anything like that, or if they're showing any kind of anything you're concerned about, you may have to talk about assessment. And one adage that we speak about in child psychiatry is that if a child isn't reading by age 8, usually the trajectory of that child is very negative, because they tend to kind of get into trouble, get in with the wrong crowd, and they may actually end up in in the criminal services. Actually, 50% of the children who come through Child Guidance Clinic have a learning disorder. So that kind of tells you how closely learning disorders and behavior disorders are. We want to educate them, of course, and if we detect anything, then we want a system where we can refer them. And we also want to teach our children how to care for themselves as best as they can. And that's one major outcome that we want from the school mental health literacy. Okay. Now, again, this is like, something that you need to know that can happen to anybody. So there's an interesting story. Actually, a pediatrician who is the daughter of, her father was like the professor of chemistry up at UWI. His name was something Burke. But of course, he migrated and she ended up doing pediatrics. And she, when she finished her pediatrics, she wanted to, like save the world. So she went and set up a clinic with a group of people. I guess she got a grant or something in a very kind of poor, marginalized area. And she went to the surrounding schools and said, look, I want to see these children, any children you have in trouble with, to send them to me. We will diagnose them and help you to manage them, because I want to improve things for the children here. And then she saw that the teachers were sending a whole lot of children and just diagnosing them with ADHD because they were hyperactive, they were inattentive, they couldn't pay attention for very long, they were kind of impulsive. So they thought they may have been ADHD. And she said, and what it couldn't be, right? So she was working with a group, she was the head of the group, and she sent them to she sent them to the literature. And what they found was that 10 years before, a study had been done at Kaiser Permanente. It's like a health group throughout the US. It tends to have a fairly stable set of people coming there. So what they found was that when they presented with problems, if they queried about their adverse childhood experiences, such as physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, physical neglect, emotional neglect, and so forth and so on, right? So the more of these that this group had suffered, the more likely they were to adopt health risky behavior, smoking, sexual promiscuity, and substance abuse, hypertension, and all of that. So they were able to relate these adverse childhood experiences to the later manifestation of these problems. But now Dr. Harris was able to relate it to the children that she was seeing, because she found out a lot of them suffered from this. And of course, the more of these that they suffered, the kind of worse was their behavior. They couldn't manage themselves as well. So this has become very topical, and we're very conscious about that in terms of taking care of children and adolescents. Okay. I always tell people that whenever I talk about mental health, I have to include the brain, because I want to make sure that we anchor mental health in an organ. Just like if I say you have a kidney problem, you have an idea of where your kidney is or how the kidney looks. Or if I say you have a liver problem, you have an idea how the liver looks, right? So when I'm talking about mental health, I'm talking about a brain problem, right? It's not phobia, it's not demons or whatever else, right? There are some people who feel that some of the manifestations we have seen in psychiatry may be demon possession. I don't have any problem with that. I'm a Christian. I believe it, demon possession occurred, but that would not be my first diagnosis. So, right? So I can't answer those questions. Okay. Anyway, what I'm showing you here, the important parts here are the amygdala. You see that, if you see that little kind of orangish button at the end of this green strip, right? So the amygdala is what you call a part of the limbic system, which is kind of the center of your emotional brain. Then this is your hippocampus, which is very much related to memory, working memory, all right? So the amygdala is where all of your emotions arise: anger, fear, love, orgasms, pleasure, all of that arise here, sexual feelings. The prefrontal cortex now is like the executive of a company. This person would plan and strategize and know what the company is going to be doing in 5-10 years, and be able to delay gratification, be able to tell the rest of the body, look, we're not going to the party tonight because we want to pass CSEC with a 1, right? And what I was saying is, unfortunately, our adolescents have a overactive amygdala. So that means that their sexual feelings of aggression and feeling of anger, and their emotional kind of lability is increased, while the prefrontal cortex, which should be the CEO, which should be trying to kind of control the amygdala, has not yet fully developed and won't do so until about age 24. So again, I always say that when I reach to heaven, and I hope I go to heaven, this is one thing I will ask the Father. Why did he make this arrangement? Because our children definitely, it almost seemed as if he was like setting them up for trouble, right? But maybe he was doing it because he wanted me and you to be advocates and to be there to be the prefrontal cortex for our children who have this overactive amygdala. Okay, so just to put this in a different form, you have your higher cortex. So when you're in a calm state, your cortex is, working well. So your thoughts, you can make kind of more rational, reasonable decisions. Your amygdala is kind of under control. But when you get in a high emotional state now, your higher cortex, particularly the prefrontal cortex, is disabled. And the stimuli that come in from your eyes kind of go straight to your amygdala and may cause anger, fear, excitement, love, hate, disgust, frustration, right? Or aggression. And of course, that is a problem if you're going to act on these things, right? It's a problem if you're going to, all of us will have high emotions at times, but the problem is when we decide to act on these things, on these emotions. So if we can get our cortex back in control of the amygdala, then we won't do as much damage as if we can't. Okay. So there's something called amygdala hijacking, and that is when the feeling brain is cut off from the thinking brain, and when they say, what were you thinking? Well, you weren't thinking at all. You were just feeling. So whatever your feeling brain told you to do, kick this person, stab this person. I wonder if sometimes some of these school incidents are a result of this, where you don't seem to think before you do anything. And we always hear about these stories of these men, good friends, 4 friends sitting around a table playing domino, and then one man might say something, to be joking or whatever, and that touches the corn of another man, and he get mad, and he might just take, let's say, the beer bottle he had in his hand and chop the other one, right? And you kind of wonder, how can good friends do that to themselves, to their friends? But basically what has happened is that because he made that statement, him touch a corn, and the corn is related to some kind of traumatic or emotional memory right here. And the amygdala or the feeling brain just told him exactly what to do, and the thinking brain did not come into the equation at all. In fact, I have a colleague, we were talking about Mr. Trump winning. And he said, well, Mr. Trump was able to work on the feeling brain of a lot of Americans by telling them how much the immigrants were going to do to them. And he was really speaks to this part of the brain, not the rational thinking part of the brain, the part that is afraid of Blacks and Mexicans because they're going to do this and going to do that. And unfortunately, some people, are really carried away by these emotions. Okay. So this is a kind of toolkit in terms of amygdala hijacking, right? Naming the emotion. If you can name the emotion, then usually you're getting the prefrontal cortex back into control, because just the mere mechanism of naming comes from the cortex. There's a 6-second rule. We may say count to 10. So if you can count to 10, usually your amygdala will settle down and your cortex will take over. Breathing, deep breathing, always helps in terms of getting your parasympathetic or the calming part of your nervous system to be more active. You can change the setting. That's why we tell children to walk it out. Don't bother to confront this person, walk it out. And of course, if you have somebody that you can really share with, it's almost like you're unloading the load, LOAD, on the person. So they're sharing your burden. And then people who practice mindfulness find that mindfulness and meditation helps whenever they are distressed because of amygdala hijack, because it puts them back, you know, in a calm and relaxed state. So what I just mentioned before was probably a one-off event, right? So you may have a co-worker who is usually quite nice and helpful and does good work. And then somebody comes and makes some kind of joke, so to speak, and it just sets them off, and you kind of wonder what happened. So that is your kind of amygdala hijacking. You know, you may have to, you know, kind of cool them down or take them out to another room or something. But by and large, they kind of come back to normal within like a while, and this is not their normal pattern of behavior. All right. Now, there are some people who have trauma, which is chronic. And sorry, one moment. Excuse. Okay, sorry about that. Yes, so right, if the trauma then becomes chronic, what happens is that you may set up a number of memories, basically almost in your feeling brain. Because normally memories should really go into your hippocampus, and your hippocampus is almost like a librarian and a library. I know we don't have a lot of librarians or library, but if you can come with me in terms of the analogy, in terms of putting information where, you know, where it should be put. So, you know, for instance, you see something being done differently and you inquire and you figure it out and you say, oh, so this is the same as how I did something, you know, already. And that is how your brain kind of, you know, stacks information one on top of the other, and it stacks like things together, right? So, but if you have a number of traumatic memories, it tends to be somewhere between the amygdala and the hippocampus, or it's not stored the same way. And that is why if you get a trigger, you can lash out at the person. And if it's sufficient, or you know, if it's severe enough, you may lash out quite a bit or very frequently, and you may lash out. The person's looking on may say, so that wasn't called for. You know, that was, you know, that was extreme. But basically you're reacting to what happened to you in the past. So I give the example, if a woman was raped and the man had on this cologne, and she goes in the bus and she stands beside somebody who has on the same cologne, she's kind of thrown back into the time when she was raped, and she kind of goes through all of that trauma and may actually start panicking and all of that. So, you know, that is how chronic trauma, one way that it can affect our daily life. Right, so this is just putting it, you know, spelling it out. So prefrontal cortex, rational thinking, it regulates your emotions, such as your fear responses that's coming from the amygdala. And when you have post-traumatic stress disorder, because of the chronic stress, this part shrinks. And unfortunately, this part becomes more active. So the amygdala is wired for survival. And when active, it's hard to think rationally. The more hyperactive it is, the more signs of PTSD are present, okay? And then you have the hippocampus, which is like your, as I say, your librarian in a library. It's responsible for memory and differentiating between past and present, works to remember and make sense of the trauma. But it sometimes can be very difficult unless you get certain kind of therapy to kind of bring up the memory and help you to deal with the memory. With consistent exposure to trauma, it actually shrinks. So we can see like it's almost like the more useful parts of our brain kind of shrink when it exposed to too much trauma, and our amygdala, kind of our feeling brain, becomes more and more active. Actually, the hippocampus is also related to like being able to do like mathematical problems, and that may be a reason why we have so much problems in terms of, you know, kids doing well at maths if they're exposed to a lot of trauma. Okay, so this is a diagram which I thought was very explanatory, and it gave me a pictorial map of really what happens. It can happen with children or it can happen with adults, but I'll say with a child. So a typical child, let's say the child is going to Ardennes, lives with parents, lives in a fairly safe community. So in terms of brain power, so let's say this person had like 100 megawatts or megabytes of brain power. That person is able to devote 40, let's say 40 megabytes of the brain power to cognition. So the learning takes up is the biggest portion of the brain power, so to speak. The next biggest person, that person has the brain power to be very social, make friends, and to manage their emotions, right? They don't have a lot of anger or fear or aggression within them. Well, I'm generalizing. So they don't have to put a lot of energy or devote a lot of brain power to regulating, kind of almost suppressing those emotions which are kind of disturbing them. And because they know they get lunch money, they know they're going home to dinner, they have a roof over their head, they have clothes and shoes, they only have to maybe devote 10 megabytes to survival. Now look at this child over here now. This child over here now lives in the inner city and has witnessed a lot of trauma. Mother is a helper, probably unemployed, don't know where father is. There are other children in the house. Just a lot of things are going on. So you can see the biggest portion of their brain power is now going to be devoted to survival. The thoughts of, you know, am I going to have anywhere to sleep tonight? Am I going to get food when I go home? All of these survival issues, right? And if suppose, let's say you have an abusive parent, you know, is he going to attack me tonight? Is he going to, you know, drink rum and get drunk and, you know, and get boisterous? So let's say 40 megabytes of the brain power are devoted to that. Because of all of these issues, let's say 30 megabytes of brain power have to go to regulation because there's a lot of anger and fear and anxiety and all of these emotions that need to be suppressed, you know, in order to function in a school setting with, you know, other children and to learn your 3 R's. So there's lesser brain power now for him or her to interact and be social and be friendly, okay? Because he's using up most of it, you know, in these arena. And of course, we see the little tip up here, the little tip, 10 megabytes. 10 megabytes that this poor child can now devote to, you know, learning maths, learning English, or learning whatever, right? And I recently, you know, listened to Dr. Herbert Gale, and he's almost stressing this in a different way. He's really saying that if we don't deal with these issues, you know, we're not really going to we're not going to be able to help most of our children to do well and to come out well, because, you know, so much of their brain power is taken up with survival and also trying to suppress emotions that they know will derail them, right? And this is just to show you a picture of, you know, what may happen to some people who have had maybe chronic trauma. So they may feel shame, self-hatred. Sometimes sexual abuse brings this on. Some people don't disclose sexual abuse until they're way in their adult age. I don't know how many of you know Michael Abrams, Dr. Abrams. I mean, he's very easy to talk to. So a lot of the women who go to him, he's a gynecologist. It's a time when they go to him because, you know, he is so easy to talk to, that they disclose that they may have been a victim of sexual abuse, right? So it can engender a lot of shame and self-hatred. You can get panic attacks. Some people get chronic pain and headaches. They start abusing substances. You have self-destructive behaviors. Sometimes promiscuity, or with men, sometimes it's like, you know, racing cars. You know, the need to get this high to keep them going. Sometimes people try to block out the memories. This is the hypervigilance I was talking about, just seeming to be just on edge. Somebody touch you and you jump, you know, like you want to jump out of your skin, right? And then some people just dissociate sometimes, where they go off into another world. And you know, I had a patient who she went to an exam, and she said, "Miss, I remember writing my name on the paper, and then the next thing I remember was the teacher coming, the invigilator coming to collect the papers, and she doesn't remember anything in between, right? Depression, irritability, loss of interest, numbing, being unable to sleep, and all of these. So all of these, sometimes we have this occasionally when we get distressed or we're going through a stressful time, or if we have gone through sufficient trauma, then these things may become, you know, chronic. So I'm just going to end now with some basic principles in terms of trying to have a trauma-informed workplace. So the first thing we have to attack is mental health stigma, and you were all talking about that. This is the kind of the elephant in the room. We have to attack mental health stigma and to be comfortable talking about mental health and so forth. Build resilience into your culture. How are you going to teach people to bounce back from drawbacks, COVID or whatever else, right? Create inclusive policies and procedures. Teach conflict resolution. If there is a mental health matter, you should keep it as confidential as possible, okay? And generally speaking, I think somebody was saying, what are the signs? You try not to diagnose. You're going to say, oh, like this person is not working well. She's not making our deadlines. She's not coming to work on time. So those are, you describe the symptoms that you see. You're not being asked to make any kind of diagnosis, right? And then the leaders need to lead, showing empathy, openness, and fairness. And for those who you know may have been exposed to trauma, you realize that you may have to give them some time to recover from this trauma. There are a lot of other points, but I decided that I would just close with this, and I'll entertain any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Liber. Boy, I listened and I'm learning as well, because you would have taken us back, well, for those who did the sciences. But we have a better understanding, I believe. I'm speaking also for those online, from a scientific and a medical point of view, why we do the things that we do. So I heard you speaking about the feeling part of the brain and the thinking part of the brain. And based on your analogy, sometimes they're not aligned. And this is where it is necessary for us as leaders in particular to empathize. We have to show some more empathy. We have to be trained in emotional intelligence to be able to pick out those points or areas where workers are experiencing whatever traumatic experience, and various behavioral changes. So very, very informative. And I really want to thank you for addressing us and taking the time out to give us a little background on how the brain works, and for us to know, look at how we can do some more work in terms of sensitizing and addressing the needs of others. So thank you very much, Dr. Liber, for that.
You're most welcome.
I will entertain questions after my next presenter, which is, she's one of us, Sister Karen Grant Simmons. And she's a Jamaican now living in Bermuda, but specializes in that field in terms of health care on a whole, and in particular mental health. I will ask my honored treasurer, Sister Melanie Mullins-Arnold, to introduce her. Over to you, Madam Treasurer.
Karen Grant Simmons has been in the nursing profession for over 24 years and has a Master of Science in Nursing degree from the University of the West Indies, Mona campus, as a psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner. She also holds 2 postgraduate diplomas, one in human resource management and the other in leadership and management from the City and Guilds of London via Management Solutions. She has also completed the Executive MBA Accelerator program. Karen is a certified critical care nurse with over 10 years experience between the operating theater, intensive care unit, and the post-anesthesia care unit. She has been an adjunct nursing lecturer in the various nursing programs at the Jamaica School of Nursing Anesthesia and currently at the Bermuda College. Karen currently serves as the president of the Bermuda Nurses Association, chair of the Nursing and Midwifery Professional Complaints Committee, and the chair of the Bermuda Public Service Union Mental Health Campaign Committee. She is also a member of the Caribbean Nurses Organization Education Committee. In 2021, Karen was awarded the Nurse of the Year in Bermuda. Karen actively participates in research, publications, and case presentations. This can be noted on the McGill University website under the heading Transcultural Care Psychiatry. She also recently presented another abstract on stigma at the 68th CARFA Health Research Conference and in Iceland. Ladies and gentlemen, guests, visitors, members, prospective members, please help me welcome Karen Grant Simmons to the virtual lectern.
Thank you very much, Sister Mullins-Arnold, for that detailed introduction. Are you able to see the presentation?
Yes, I can see. Go ahead.
Okay. I am very much humbled to be here today. Thank you for the invitation as it relates to promoting mental health and protecting human rights, building resilience, support, and awareness. So why mental health as it relates to the union and public service? Both goes hand in hand. Mental health, as Dr. Liber and previous presenters stated, it refers to our emotional, our psychological, and our social well-being. It affects how we think, how we feel, and based on how we think and feel, that impacts our behavior. In the workplace, mental health directly affects productivity, job satisfaction, and overall well-being. And as trade unions, we believe in collectivism. An injury to one is an injury to all. And I will say that again. An injury to one, if we have one person becoming depressed, having anxiety, becoming psychotic, it should be an injury to all of us. We have a role to play to advocate for workers' rights, including mental health support. Mental health has become a growing concern for workers, as 1 in 4 workers experience mental health challenges annually. Public service workers often face higher levels of stress due to demands of the job. There is increase in workplace stress and burnout, especially when you have a shortage of staff. And I can say that for the medical field, the shortage of nurses and other workers have greatly impacted the system, especially since the pandemic. We have lost 3 out of 5 nurses, 1 in every 5 doctors, which is contributing to what you term also moral injury. You take a pledge to take care of others, yet still the resources aren't there for you to do it. Mental health, as I stated, directly affects workplace productivity, job satisfaction, and community service quality. So what are some of the challenges as it relates to public service? High stress levels as a result of tight deadlines, public scrutiny, some persons working 16 to 18 hours. That contributes to burnout, emotional and physical exhaustion due to prolonged stress. Trauma, I hear you stressing trauma exposure, because how we were brought up, our environment, that impacts our mental health. When we are younger, you might have been bullied in school, neglected. I had a patient who was sharing her lived experience in one of the anti-stigma campaigns we had, and she said, when all of you were going to school, I was going to the bushes. The very same man entrusted to take her to school was taking her to the bushes to sexually assault her. She had no support then, no counseling. She eventually came down with bipolar disorder, because mental illness, as Dr. Liber says, you try to catch it early. Picture it like cancer. The sooner you get it and treat, the better it is for you. If you don't catch it early, then you tend to become more difficult to treat or to stabilize. And the more relapse an individual has, is the worse it is for the prognosis. But unfortunately, because of the stigma, the negative stereotypes, the prejudice, and the deep-seated myths that persons have, there's reluctance to seek help due to fear of judgment. Are we aware that if I have a mama or a dad with mental illness, I am at 10 times increased risk? If I have an identical twin with it, there's 40 to 70% chance I will have it, because mental illness have such a strong genetic component. And based on the trauma that I have been through, if I don't get support, that can impact my behavior. You have a lot of persons who were raped, who were traumatized, that now have what you term the borderline personality disorder. They will be the one throwing the china, wearing the wall, cutting self. They are able to form relationships quickly, but they somehow cannot maintain those relationships. And mental health conditions exist on a continuum. I'm sorry to burst some people's bubble, but there's not one person with 100% mental health every day. Today, you might be totally healthy, mentally wealthy. If your breadwinner in the family dies, you are not working, you have 5 children to feed, to tend to school, you're not going to be 100% mentally healthy then. You are going to be worried, where is my next food coming from? How am I going to take care of my children? If you do not have any support, you don't see any way out, then you will progress to mild distress. Again, no hope, no support, no way out, then you will eventually progress to moderate distress. Then after a time, you might end up with major depression. So this is how mental health, mental illness exists on a continuum, and we move up and down this continuum. But many persons walking around believe that they are immune. Mental illness is no respecter of persons, irrespective of race, color, creed, age. I have seen individuals who are totally mentally healthy, had an infection, treated with steroids, was manic denuding himself. Would you want that to happen to you when you walking around and persons looking at you as if you have been branded with an hot iron, as one of the past pioneers would describe stigma? Nobody wants to be looked on as if you have leprosy. Oftentimes also persons believe that mental illness are just the persons who are unkept, eating out of the rubbish bin. I had nursing students who were having panic attacks when they could not pay their school fee, because they know if they do not sit their exam this year, you'll have to wait an entire year to sit it. You have teachers, doctors, some of the most brilliant minds on the planet are persons with bipolar disorder. So I heard persons inquiring, what are some of the signs that you should look for? You have emotional indicators, persons appearing anxious, irritable, easily upset. They are very sad, they might be withdrawn, not participating in activities that they used to enjoy before. Behavioral changes such as absenteeism, reduced productivity, withdrawal from colleagues. Physical symptoms may be fatigue, headaches, sleep disturbances, loss of appetite, not being able to concentrate. Warning signs are signs such as expressions of hopelessness, especially for the suicide patient. Oh, this world will be better off without me. And sometimes suicide looks like this. I'm fine. The Miss USA young lady, she was great at deflecting. When you ask her, how are you doing, Mom said she would say, I'm fine, how are you? Tell me about you. Sometimes when persons say that I am fine, you have to say, are you sure? Because I knew you had a fight with your manager last week. To show them that I am here to listen to your pain. I am here to hear your pain. I am willing to listen to your pain. Persons might start abusing substance, start drinking, or there is a drastic change in the personality. So what's the role of the civil associations and unions? Collective bargaining, advocating for fair pay, because a lot of mental health stress comes from financial stressors. You also advocate for fair benefits and improved working conditions. You have policy influence, advocating for workplace mental health policies and resources. Advocate for flexible work arrangements and mental health days. That does not affect people's sick bank, vacation leave. Flexible work hours, thanks to COVID, some might be able to work remote if they can't take their child to daycare. If the work allows it, some persons are able to work better remote from home than in a working environment. Ensuring that there are support systems in place, employee assistance programs, peer support networks, counseling, and persons are aware where to go to access these services. Also, training and education. Raise awareness and promote mental health training to union members, shop stewards, and the community. For the BPSU Mental Health Campaign Committee, what we do to raise awareness, we have workshops and seminars. We educate union leaders, members, and shop stewards on mental health. We have monthly newsletters, quarterly presentations, and we have an online website wherein persons can go to access this information. We collaborate with local organizations and we partner with mental health resources to support workers. We also have mental health awareness campaigns to promote awareness through events and initiatives. This was the shop steward training where we were training shop stewards to recognize early signs of mental illness, where to send persons for support, and also how to take care of their own mental health, because everybody coming to you with all their issues, you also have to balance and take care of your mental health. I'm sure you'll see a familiar face over here. This was the CPSU conference presentation. There again, we were championing mental health in the workplace. And over here to the right, you have other members of the BPSU Mental Health Campaign Committee.
Sorry, Sister Karen, I have a participant, but he has to leave us.
Mr. Chong, yes, I see the hand
Chong,
up.
I just want to just,
No problem.
can you oblige me to allow him to
Yes.
ask his question? And then he can go. Mr. Chong, sorry I missed you earlier. You may go ahead, please.
Thank you very much. I have to run, but I wanted to say this. So important that as a psychosociologist that specializes in risk assessment, one of the things that we have done is to develop a tool that looks at organization. Why? Because we realize that there is a thing called sick organization syndrome. That is a mental illness because the organization is sick. What makes the organization sick? There are three systems in the organization: the administrative, the social, and the psychological. Now, the psychological is responsible for rewards and recognition. The social is like occupational safety and health, industrial relations, and the social relationships of work, such like conflict resolution and things like that. So, and usually the head of that is not the head of the organization. The head of the social section of the organization is the HR manager. But HR managers are not taking this on. And so therefore there is a serious deficit in the management of the social relationships of work, which has to do with promotions and all of those kind of things. And of course, you have the administrative head. Now, sometimes the administrative head run what you call the hip shot over the social section of it. So what you find out is that we have a lot of sick organizations, especially in the public sector. Now, what are the symptoms? Sick organizational syndrome. A lot of workers suffering from it. They don't want to go to work in the morning. They get up and they don't no longer communicate with their co-workers. They have fears that they are going to be fired or something like that. They have nobody to support them in making their targets and all of that sort of thing. So we have developed a tool, and the president is now tasking me with implementing that in the public sector in Jamaica, where we are going to be assessing all the public sector organization and give a report. At the end of the report, we'll be talking about the wholesomeness of the organization. In other words, is this a sick organization or is this a well organization? Why do we want to do that? If somebody have mental illness, whether it is clinical or it has been induced by circumstances, and you stick somebody into an organization that is sick, it's going to be worse. And if you have a well person and put them in a sick organization, they can be sick. So it is something that we have to work on in order to make the organizations well so that workers can function in these organizations to a level where they are producing. One of the things that we found out about persons who suffer from SOS is that their productivity level is less than 40%. And there's also another one that we discovered, PSTD, PTSD, post-traumatic syndrome disorder. And I think one of the presenters talked about that. The conditions of work traumatize you. And these persons are not monitored to see that their mental health is not being affected by this. So we need to identify those places and to identify that there is something there to help these persons. One of the things that help is that in the HR department, there's what we call a confidential desk, where there is a worker who's tasked with this confidentiality, and not even the administrative head of the department can get information from that person. That person is not reporting to anyone except that they see the help that the workers need, that you can go and report this, including occupational safety and health infringements, because sometimes workers are working in conditions that traumatize them because people are getting sick, people are getting injured, people are getting into accident, and they don't want to talk because they are afraid of getting fired. So the whole aspect of the psychosocial management of work, psychosocial hazard risk management, is an evolving and new concept from occupational safety and health. And the JCSA is now ready to roll out that kind of thing. And I think the president has put that in this year's claim, managing the occupational safety and health in the public sector, because that has gone long. Sorry, I have to run, but that is
Where
my
can we
input.
find the tool, Mr. Strong?
Beg pardon?
Where can we find the assessment tool?
Oh, we have that assessment tool. We have not rolled it out yet.
So what, we have to
developed
purchase it?
I think so. You have to talk to the president, you know, she manages all these kind of things.
Well, we need access to the tool. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much,
Okay.
GS, for allowing me to say that.
Yes,
Sure
we'll fall
thing,
under
Mr.
the
Trump.
same slide here, safe work environments.
You may continue, Sister Karen. Thanks for your intervention, Mr. Chong.
No problem, dear. So using collective bargaining for mental health support, negotiation for mental health days, safe work environment is what Mr. Chung was referring to. Push for anti-bullying, harassment, and incivility policies. Also, safe psychological working environment where I can say, I don't agree with this, or can we try it that way without threat of losing your job or repercussion. Mental health care coverage, ensuring counseling, mental health services are included in employer health plans. I will show you some examples of what we have done thus far. This is the General Counsel taking a firm stance against HBI. We send this out to varying key stakeholders, employers, to take a photo to say we are taking a strong stance against HBI, because if you have managers that are not trained, that are bullies, then you are going to have a toxic, non-therapeutic working environment, which is what Mr. Chung said will make persons sick, or if you are already sick, you are going to get worse. Work is where we go. It is our second home. So we should not be enduring a toxic environment. We should try to make it therapeutic, where persons wake up in the morning and it is a joy to get to work. This is the American Airlines saying no to bullying and harassment, taking a stance. We also had the largest employers, the hospital, also taking a stance, and this is on our Facebook page. We had virtual panel discussions. This was on World Mental Health Day. Shifting the narrative, demystifying mental health in the workplace and community. We also had it on the television, the Bermuda Broadcasting Corporation. We were highlighting what we were advocating for, mental health days, how one can promote their mental health and the role of the union. This was Mental Health Expo, uniting with varying key presenters and stakeholders and treatment providers in the community. Everyone could come for free to find out where they could get information on how to promote their mental health or to treat their mental illness. This was a table that we had for the Mental Health Campaign Committee with Mindfulness Challenge, varying pamphlets promoting mental health and demystifying mental health in the workplace. This was one of the photos that we had, and you also had it in the Royal Gazette. So they took varying photos of persons doing exercise. This was a wheel where persons would spin to do activities to promote their mental health. And here you had persons going to access varying information. Please don't take this photo as yet. This is one of the advertisements that we have paid for in the Royal Gazette. Every year they have an health section of the Gazette, and this is an advertisement that we have in there. Take care of your mental health. This will be published next week. It is your greatest wealth. Highlighting the BPSU Mental Health Campaign Committee, what is our role, where individuals can get further information, or where they can reach out to us. So overcoming barriers to mental health in the workplace. The stigma is one of the biggest barriers, because even during COVID, we had nurses who were literally breaking down, and we had a 24-hour crisis hotline that they could call, and they would not call it because nobody wanted to be labeled that they have a mental disorder. So what you have to do in cases like those is have group therapy. So we had a psychologist that did Zoom sessions with the entire staff, so no individual is singled out. That also helped to build a therapeutic working environment. Also strengthen union policies on mental health. If you have limited resources for small unions, collaborate with mental health organizations. If there's employer resistance, leverage technology to offer mental health resources. Unions, we have to unite for mental health in the workplace. Form cross-national partnership to share best practices. Advocate for mental health policies and ensuring there's knowledge of support systems. Push for comprehensive wellness approaches and an inclusive and positive work culture. As I said, an injury to one is an injury to all. Develop standardized mental health training for union leaders and shop stewards. As a union, we work along with organizations to create a culture of openness. This is what will build a healthy work environment, not the toxic, non-therapeutic, sick one that Mr. Chong was telling you about. Work along with organizations to recognize work-life balance. Set realistic job demands. Give employees a say in how they work, a safe psychological space, ensuring good relationships and making job roles clear so that people don't get pimped out. They keep on adding this, adding that, or any other stuff managers can give to you. As union advocates, we advocate for equal pay and opportunities, anti-discrimination policies, safe psychological space, accommodations for disabilities, and for employees feeling valued and appreciated. That is the #1 motivator. As Hirschberg theory says, money is hygiene factor. Pay people enough money so that come off the table of discussion, but employees feeling valued and appreciated is the #1 motivator. So thank you. I will leave you with this video that we did highlighting the panel discussion. Oftentimes we expect people to just drop their troubles and to function. If we do not promote mental health, then it's going to affect productivity, the environment, and the overall well-being.
Answer. Culture is the answer for the true change. We sometimes forget that our differences are actually important. Not every family is going to knock on that door for counseling. We have found that the collaborative approach to care has actually enabled the access. The biggest thing we do at EAP is give people a blueprint for their own life, but based on the individuality of them.
Men, particularly in Bermuda, like in many other jurisdictions, there is this whole cultural stigma about seeking mental health services.
A lot of mental health stressors come from financial stress. This mentality about leave all your issues and your challenges and do it when you come to work, we can't go on like that anymore. We talk about mental health this, mental health this. It's super important. We need to do something, and then we go silent.
So we don't wish to go silent. We wish to promote mental health because it is our greatest wealth. Thank you.
Very, very well done, Sister Karen. We wish to promote mental health because it is our greatest wealth. You know, a key feature of what you do. And you know, I noted in your presentation where you had an injury to one is an injury to all. And if we as leaders, trade unionists, employer representatives, human resource personnel, etc., take this statement and fit it in as a key feature of the work that we do, I think the culture of care will be dealt with in a better way. So I really appreciate the work that you have been doing and continue to do on behalf of your colleagues in Bermuda. And of course, you will be hearing more from us here back home, Karen, and we too want to adopt some of those things that you have been doing. So thank you again for your presentation on this very informative topic. I am asking my PR team, I'm not sure if there were any questions in the chat or if at this point we have any questions at all. If not, then we could move on, but I want to be guided as we do have two other presenters.
I am seeing, I'm just seeing comments, basically. Persons are grateful. Somebody said that. Hold on 1 minute. I would also appreciate the presentation to be shared within my ministry. This is from Stephanie King Halstead.
Okay.
And somebody was saying 80, the presenters covered everything. I am grateful for the opportunity to hear. Xavier Hutchinson said harassment, bullying, incivility, HBI, and good presentation. Thank you, Madam President. There's another comment. The system is designed to frustrate and bully employees as there are hardly any policies, labor laws in place to mitigate against HBI. There are dress code, sexual harassment policies, standing orders, but no policies to protect mental health by guarding against HBI. And that's it.
All right. Thank you very much, Sister Helen, for that. So let us move on. We have two other presentations. We have Mrs. Camille Bennett Campbell, who is an attorney at law. And Mrs. Bennett Campbell will be speaking to us. Actually, we'll be having a conversation and zooming in a bit on persons living with persons with disabilities and occupational safety and health. So, Mrs. Bennett Campbell, over to you. Well, I should ask Mrs. Mullins-Arnold to just briefly introduce you before you start to speak. My apologies. Go ahead, Mrs. Mullins-Arnold.
Sure. Camille Bennett Campbell is the principal consultant of Benefit Campbell Law BLC. Camille brings her 25 years of experience as a practicing attorney at law to BCL, as she was called to the bar in Jamaica in 1999. She possesses a Bachelor of Laws LLB with honors from the University of the West Indies Cave Hill campus, as well as a Bachelor of Arts BA with honors in English from the University of the West Indies Mona, and a Master's in Law LLM in Law and Employment Relation from the University of Lancaster, United Kingdom in 2007. She has garnered experience in several areas of law throughout the years, including labor and employment law, disabilities law, occupational safety and health law, and contract law. Her interest and expertise in these areas blossomed during her almost 13 years tenure at the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, Jamaica, where she played a key role in the passage of the Disabilities Act in 2014 and worked on the Occupational Safety and Health Bill. At the MLSS, that's the Ministry of Labor and Social Security, she served as a senior legal officer from 2009 to 2013. Director of Legal Services, acting in 2014, and she was thereafter appointed as the second appointed director in the history of MLSS. She served in this position until July of 2022, when she joined Employment Matters Caribbean and Karine N. Stanley and Co. as a consultant, where she garnered private sector experience in several areas, including administration of estates, conveyancing law, labor, employment law, and occupational safety and health. Camille is passionate about the practice of law and looks forward to sharing with you on mental health at work, particularly in the context of occupational safety and health and the Disabilities Act 2014, sorry, that's 2014. Please help me welcome the lady of the moment, Camille Bennett Campbell.
Over to you now, Camille. Thank you. Unmute. I'm not sure, we're not hearing you.
Needs to unmute.
Yes, thanks. I was saying that it was saying that the host had to unmute me, so it wasn't working on my end. Good afternoon, everyone. It has been an interesting session so far. I've enjoyed the presentations, and I look forward to adding my part and my perspective. I think all the presentations actually support each other when I hear what has been said. And thank you for still being here with us. Without further ado, let me try and share my screen. Can you assist me with sharing the presentation? I know I have sent it, but I will go ahead in the meantime in the interest of time.
Okay,
No,
we're going to see what we can do on our end, Camille.
Yes, but yeah, I'll go ahead in the meantime.
Okay.
But if you can share while I'm going ahead so persons can see while I go along. So as it was said, I'm speaking about mental health in the context of the Disabilities Act 2014 and occupational safety and health. I'm particularly dealing with the Jamaican perspective. So in 2019, the World Health Organization estimated that 15% of working age adults had a mental disability. Globally, an estimated 12 billion working days were lost every year due to depression and anxiety alone. And I've quoted in the presentation the authority for this. Now, I listened to the medical practitioners and I'll be guided. For the purposes of this presentation, I'm using the definition of mental health as set out by the World Health Organization guidelines on mental health at work. It means a state of well-being that enables people to cope with stresses of life, to realize their abilities, to learn well and work well and contribute to their communities. I am on, go forward just a little. There's one more. One more. Well, I'll wait, I'll go ahead. However, as has been stated before by many presenters, persons spend a lot of time at work. We spend many hours there. So for a wide cross-section of persons, mental health and work are integrally intertwined. And as it has been stated, some persons will have already entered the workplace with mental issues. Some will develop throughout the time because of the different stresses of life that are all not work-related. In addition, the technological advances, while they have enhanced productivity, they have also had the effect of negatively affecting mental health. You know how hard it is with a cell phone to shut down from work. Sometimes there's no clear divide anymore between work time and your home time. So balancing work and home life becomes a problem. It is even worse for persons in essential service, such as nursing, with the hours they have to keep. So it must be appreciated though, despite the increased productivity, insufficient prevention treatment, care, and management of mental health conditions is causing significant human suffering worldwide. It is also imposing a high economic burden on countries, since individuals who suffer from mental illnesses are more likely to exit the labor force early, miss work days, or work at a reduced capacity, which is called presenteeism. In Jamaica, the burden of mental health is considerable and is predicted to cause 2.76 billion in lost economic output from 2015 to 2030. Note that, caused 2.76 billion in lost economic output from 2015 to 2030. Obviously, urgent intervention is needed. And I took this information from the PAHO, Care for Mental Health Conditions in Jamaica. If you have the time, you can have a look at it, because it was very interesting to me and it shows why interventions are needed. So to what extent has the Disabilities Act, which has been passed, how will this assist the mental health in the workplace? Now the Act, which is a 2014 Act, didn't come into effect until February 19, 2022. Now this groundbreaking piece of legislation, it seeks to give effect to the United Nations Conventions on Persons with Disabilities to some respect. It seeks to promote, protect, and enhance the full and equal enjoyment by persons with disabilities, who I will call PWDs sometimes. So persons with disabilities, PWDs, of privileges, interests, benefits, and treatment on an equal basis with other persons in society. Note, in the Act, it always says on an equal basis with other persons. So it's a human rights issue. It's equality with persons with disabilities and other persons. Importantly, this Act binds the crown. So the government as an employer is also bound by the provisions of this act. It's not just related to the private sector. Now, I won't go through all of this of the act because there are many, but I'll highlight two for you. The presentation has the rest. To reinforce and promote recognition and acceptance within Jamaica of the principle that a person with a disability has the same fundamental rights and freedoms as any other person in society. Prevent or prohibit discrimination against a person with a disability. Also, to protect their independence and decision-making. Now, Section 2 of the Act defines a person with a disability, and this is very important because to be protected by this Act, you have to follow within the definition. It says, a person with a disability includes a person who has a long-term physical, mental, intellectual, or sensory impairment, sensory like blindness, for example, which may hinder his full and effective participation in society on an equal basis with other persons. Note, however, that because it says a permanent, a long-term disability, it's not all mental health issues, therefore, that will fall within the classification of a mental disability. Mental health is a wider concept and a term. And notice, it must impair the person's participation in society. You can move forward. I finished this one, so you can just go forward one more so that persons are following with me. Now, several areas are highlighted in the Act for special protection, but for the purposes of this presentation, I'm going to focus on two, which is protection from discrimination and protection in the context of employment. So, the slide has gone, the presentation has gone very far. Anyway, Section 25 of the Act, I'm still on Disabilities Act. So go forward. All right, you can stay there. That's not where I am, but just so you catch up. Section 25 specifies that a person with a disability shall not, by reason of such disability, be subject to any form of discrimination. So, you know, it has been said how much stigma and discrimination there is in the workplace. So there is some protection for that. As I said, it's all about equality. Not because the person is different means that they are not equal. How do you make accommodations for them? Now, discrimination is any distinction, exclusion, or restriction on the basis of disability that results in the persons not being able to enjoy their rights in life, not just in the workplace. And it includes all forms of discrimination, including denial of reasonable arrangements. And I will tell you a little bit about reasonable arrangements, which is so important in any legislation dealing with disabilities. Now, Section 29 to 31, very important. It deals with employment. An employer is prohibited from discriminating against a PWD who is otherwise qualified for the job. The person is qualified for the job, you cannot discriminate. Now, it does beg the question, though, that the Act also deals with education, which is not a part of the discussion here. But if you are not leveling the playing field at the level of education in schools, then when the person comes to the workplace context, they're already at a disadvantage because they may not be qualified for the job. So it really starts from the education aspect of things so that you level the playing field. So you cannot offer different terms of employment. You can't offer different opportunities for promotion, transfer, training, or any other benefit. Importantly, you cannot dismiss a person on the basis of disability alone without reasonable cause. So if it's a disability that is the issue, that cannot be the sole basis for dismissal of a worker or any other detriment such as suspension or any other action. What the employer must do in the first instance is try to make reasonable arrangements. So I heard Ms. Corrodus talk about the performance evaluation. You have set targets for the person with a disability similar to somebody else, but because of their disability, they cannot meet those targets, right? So you have to look at the issue and make reasonable arrangements. What are reasonable arrangements? It refers to the necessary and appropriate modification and adjustments which are needed in a particular case to allow the person to actually work effectively if we're speaking in a workplace context. Now, this modification is specific to the person with disability and the need of the person. So while the Act uses things like hearing devices and wheelchairs, those are just examples, right? That will only address physical disabilities. So I will give you some further examples in the context of mental disability. So it is evident that the Act actually extends to persons with mental and intellectual impairments, and that they are protected from discrimination generally in society and also in the workplace. So, catching up to the slide that is here now, what are the reasonable arrangements that could be made once you have realized the employee has such a disability? And stigma is important because sometimes you may not realize the person has a mental disability unless they tell you. It's not all the time that you will realize the visual. So you must have an open environment where persons are free to actually disclose this. Now, some of the reasonable arrangements include providing the worker with flexible work arrangements. You know, the law was amended to make room for flexible work arrangements. Somebody may be on medication, for example, for depression or some other illness that affects their ability to get up early. If they are more productive starting at 10 o'clock, why not? Providing the worker with additional time to complete tasks. It may be that because of the disability or the impairment this person is going through, they need an additional time to complete a task. Modified assignments to reduce stress. Can move forward. Time off for health appointments can also be considered. Regular supportive meetings. Sometimes persons just need somebody to listen to them. So coming again to this whole emotional intelligence. Recommending counseling when needed. I repeat, it's not permissible to dismiss a person with a disability solely because of disability. The first course of action, and the civil service also should note this. The first course of action is to make reasonable arrangements. This may also require medical advice to give guidance as to what arrangements can be made to allow the person to actually work effectively. Now, very quickly, because I need to get to OSHA, if a person is suffering from a breach of the Act, they have the right to report the matter to the Jamaica Council for Persons with Disabilities established under the Act, right? But you have 2 years after the occurrence of the breach. So if you're dismissed, for example, you have 2 years in which to make that report. It's not something that's going to give you 6 years. So person has to act promptly. So union, you have to be able to actually advise the worker accordingly. If the complaint is not resolved, the Act has established a disabilities rights tribunal, which is empowered to hear complaints and to give redress. So that is all the time that is allowed in relation to disabilities. I will go quickly onto occupational safety and health. So you can move forward. Now, it would have been noticed that the Occupational Safety and Health Act in Jamaica has not yet been passed. So there's still a lacuna in the law as relates to protection. There was a bill tabled in 2017, but after feedback from a joint select committee, And also from stakeholders, that bill is being revised by the ministry. Now, one of the main objectives of the 2017 bill, because that is what I have to rely on in speaking, because while there will be changes, there are some elements that have to remain because that's what OSHA's legislation, and you also have ILO conventions to comply with. Now, it is to prevent accidents and injury to health arising out of or linked with work. Protecting workers against harm to safety and health through the elimination, or where elimination is not possible, minimization of hazards, so far as is reasonably practicable. So it is recognized, for example, a heavy workload is a hazard and a risk. But based on the nature of the work, such as essential services, you may not be able to eliminate it, but how do you minimize the effects? That is what occupational safety and health legislation asks you to look at. Now, importantly, and I think Mr. Chung made this point before he left, hazards are not just physical hazards in the workplace. It also covers psychosocial hazards. So giving you some example, Safe Work Australia provides some example of psychosocial hazards in the workplace. And these are things that cause psychological harm to someone's mental health. High job demand, low control in the job, poor support, inadequate reward and recognition system, remote or isolated work. So if it's one thing to have somebody working from home because it's the best for them, but how do you interact with that person so that they're not shut off mentally from the workplace? It has already been mentioned, violence and aggression, bullying, sexual harassment. Those are all psychosocial hazards. Poor workplace relationships and interactions. Now, the aim of OSHA legislation is to create a work environment in which there is constant monitoring. So you're monitoring to reduce or eliminate risk. So you're always looking. This will require a joint approach. It requires employers, workers, trade unions like the Civil Service Association, and safety and health representatives, which will be elected in the workplace, all work, and the employee themselves, working closely together to monitor and prevent and eliminate and minimize risks to safety and health. Psychosocial risks include workload, overload, high levels of pressure. So you may have pressure at moments, but how do you break that down? Are there moments where workers can actually stop and enjoy themselves in between? Is it just an environment where it's work? There has to be a balance. Shift work, night work, unpredictable hours. I already talked about lack of control. And organizational culture, and some people have spoken about the toxic workplace, poor communication, low levels of support for problem solving, a workplace that does not know how to deal with interpersonal relationships at work. How do you deal with conflict in the workplace? Do you ignore it or do you assist the workers in resolving it? Because all of this will affect the person's mental health. And I already mentioned bullying. Now, organizations must make interventions that address psychosocial risk factors. So sometimes you can reduce the work. Sometimes persons are trying to save money, not wanting to hire additional workers and therefore stressing the few workers. But in the long term, it's going to affect your productivity. Improvement in communication and teamwork. A team atmosphere is important. And this is where occupational safety and health intersects now with mental health. Reasonable work arrangements for workers with mental disabilities. Training of managers to support workers' mental health. Training and sensitization of workers. Somebody asked, how do you recognize if somebody is having a mental health issue? Training can actually assist persons in assisting themselves and their co-workers by raising awareness. support for essential service workers who are at a higher risk of mental health issues. I already spoke about activities that relieve stress and strong systems for managing conflicts and grievances that occur in the workplace. So, in conclusion, the Disabilities Act 2014 and Occupational Safety and Health Act, when enacted, will provide a requisite legislative framework to support the management of mental health in the workplace. However, significant work must be done to address the stigma related to mental health conditions, which serves as an obstacle to persons obtaining the intervention needed to address their condition before it escalates. And must be recalled, anyone can have a mental health issue at any time. It must be appreciated that inadequate management of mental health in the workplace will have a deleterious effect on productivity in the workplace and, by extension, the economy. In addition, it will negatively impact the most valuable asset to any workplace, its workers. Thank you for your attention.
I'm sorry about that. Okay. Camille, again, another informative perspective, especially from the legal lens. And I note the Disabilities Act in terms of your stress on the reasonable arrangements. And I think that is something that we would need to be more informed about and for some assistance in terms of how you can guide us, particularly in the trade union, on how we can advance our arguments and articulate our positions on the reasonable arrangement. What are the key areas that we are to look out for? So we will definitely have further discussions, Camille, in this regard. And I do thank you and appreciate your intervention and your pointers in terms of
Moderator?
mental health. Sorry.
Sorry about that, but I think there's a question in the chat that that says, how can an organization ensure that employees who have been victimized receive adequate support and protection?
Okay, so we'll field that question to Camille.
Yes, really and truly, if somebody has been victimized, that's why I don't know if I managed to say the thing about ensuring that there's counseling too. And there has to be, and some workplaces, honestly, persons do not believe their HR is confidential. So when the support they could get, they don't get because they won't go forward to HR to report the issue because they're afraid of everybody knowing. So there has to be an open culture, but also a culture that values confidentiality so that people can be able to come to help. Most of the HR manuals I've drafted do make provision in terms of protection of persons from victimization, right? So enforcing what you have. You know, we have the Sexual Harassment Act on the books. So there is protection for sexual harassment. How much is it being utilized, for example? So you can't have the laws in place and then you don't actually make use of them when they're there to protect you. So in some cases, the workers can raise this as a grievance, for example. How does the workplace deal with the grievance? There are procedures in place for grievance in the public sector. So those are areas that can be used to actually protect the worker.
Thank you for that, Camille. And I do see another hand up, Livingston Burnett. You may go ahead, Livingston.
Hello, good afternoon, moderator. Good afternoon, everyone. Great presentation so far. So since we have the lawyer online now, I would like to know if there are any mental health disorders that are in the act that are delineated as disabilities? Do we have any mental health disorders that are mentioned in the act as disabilities? Over.
No, the legislature was very careful because mental disability, nature of things is that it's changed. So mental disability is more open. What it's going to look at is the level of long-term impairment. So something like schizophrenia. I must also point out that the act was held up because the disabilities regulations were not ready until 2022. So a person who believes that they have a disability, there's a registration process through the Jamaica Councils for Persons with Disabilities. And that will require some amount of medical input from a medical practitioner as to whether the person has a disability. So that will assist. So the act does not define mental or restrict mental disability. It depends on the long-term effects of it and the level of impairment of the person's ability, and it will require medical input. So I also use the platform to implore persons who have a disability who have loved ones with a disability to actually register under the JCPD to get some protection, and also there's some benefits available. So the union could also assist persons in terms of lobbying for this registration on the JCPD. And that would be the registration on the JCPD will assist somebody who is claiming, I have a disability. So the short answer is the act did not restrict it by saying these are the only mental disabilities, because things change with time.
Wonderful input, Camille, and our participants. So I now want to move on to our last presenter. Thank you very much, Camille. And we will be in further dialogue. I now want to move on to our final presenter. And this is one of our very own, Brother Dean Flores, who is the president of the Belize Public Service Union. And he will be speaking a bit about mental health in the workplace and how this is a human rights issue, given his own spin and having the conversation. So I invite Sister Mullins Arnold to present Brother Flores. Over to you.
Dean Flores is the current president of the Public Service Union of Belize, PSUB. Mr. Flores has been the president since May 2021. Prior to ascending to the president, he served as first vice president of the BSUB. Dean Flores is employed with the government of Belize and holds the substantive post of auditor in the Petroleum Department of the Ministry of National Resources, Mining and Petroleum. He previously worked in accounts and investment departments of the Belize Social Security Board, as well as the offshore banking sector with Provident Bank, now Heritage Bank of Belize. Mr. Flores is a graduate of the University of Belize and holds a bachelor's degree in accounting. He also possesses a certificate in the Advanced International Program of Oil and Gas Financial Management from the Naveen Jindal School of Management, University of Texas at Dallas. He also holds a certificate in Labor Studies and Industrial Relations from Cipriani College of Labor and Cooperative Studies in Trinidad. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome the only man among the roses, president of the Bermuda Public Service Union, Dean Flores.
Go ahead, Brother Dean. The virtual lectern is yours.
Yeah, okay, there you go. Yes, can you hear me?
Sure, we are hearing you.
Yes, thanks for that wonderful introduction, Melanie. Unfortunately, I'm from Belize, not Bermuda. Right? Yeah, in the end, she said Bermuda. So, good afternoon, comrades. I'm hoping that my presentation will be within the time allocated. Definitely, I know we've been here for a while, and I was asked to speak, of course, on what the Public Service Union of Belize has done in advancing legislative changes as it relates to mental health as a workplace human right, or as a right in the workplace. No, so quickly, without further ado, let me go straight into my presentation. Everybody can see my screen, right?
Yes, we can.
All right, perfect. Yeah, so good afternoon again, and good afternoon, President Tisha. And I must commend yourself, Sister Tiffany, and the entire team, of course, for taking the time to put on your agenda the matter of mental health. As unions, I think that this is a very important issue for us to really look at. Primarily, we've been looked at as simply championing fair wages and physical safety, but more and more as the world changes, I think we can all agree that this is something that we have overlooked, and it is severely impacting not only productivity, but of course our personal well-being and the way how we treat and interact with each other. So just quickly, I just had a couple introductory slides, which of course would have already been touched on by the other excellent presentations that were delivered earlier today. Mental health, exposure to unfavorable social, economic, geopolitical, and environmental circumstances. I felt this was important because, you know, there's no one thing that can trigger our mental health, and I thank one of the presenters, of course, for having drawn the distinction between mental health and mental disorder. If I'm speaking too quickly, please let me know also, right? But yeah, so I felt it very important to highlight that this also includes poverty, violence, inequality, and environmental deprivation. All these factors increases one's risk in experiencing some form of mental health condition. The right to health is established in several international human rights instruments. There is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. There is the World Health Organization's constitution that establishes our right to health. The International Convention on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People as well. Access to mental health, therefore, or to mental health care is part of the broader right to health. The right to health encompasses both physical and mental well-being. It is of these established human rights that I believe my predecessors would have looked at this matter back in 2014 with the view of incorporating some aspect of it within our own public service regulations. So back in 2008, in December of 2008, is when the Public Service Union of Belize would have introduced to government certain proposals for consideration. And high amongst that was the modernization of the public service. And incorporated in that modernization was the revision of all the regulations that governs the public service. And that includes the Public Service Regulation, the General Workers Regulations, which governs open boat workers, and the Liber Act. Along with those proposals, the PSUB at the time was looking at several ILO conventions. Amongst those were 135, 154, 158, and 183. We didn't get all of them signed. For example, 158 is still on the table. We're bringing that back in our negotiations next year, but we would have been successful in getting several others not included in this list here signed on to by the government. So in keeping with ILO conventions, the fact that Belize also is a member of the CARICOM Single Market and Economy, and there are rules and regulations in there as well. It was looking at this entire regional and global sphere that we exist in that we attempted to modernize our own regulations within the public service. Right. So our proposals were received by government, as I stated, in December of 2008. And it was until 2014 that we were able to complete the exercise of a revised public service regulations. And within that regulations that exist today, which coincidentally is being revised after 10 years. And so I would be more than happy to share with your president or your general secretary, of course, our revised regulation, which I expect to come out next year. It will be a complete overhaul from the 2014 version. We've spent the last year, or at least a working committee has spent the last year looking at that 2014 regulations. They've completed their work. It has not been presented to us as yet for comments, but my last interaction with the Ministry of Public Service was that it was completed, and that will be circulated to us for further discussions among our membership to determine whether we accept the revised regulations. So in 2025, I expect a new public service regulation, and hopefully we'll see some strengthening of regulations 206. And currently what regulations 206 speaks to is that the ministry shall institute an employee assistance program entailing a confidential framework to provide public officers with voluntary, and I found it necessary to highlight that access to help has to be voluntary, and it cannot be forced on anyone. Voluntary referral and counseling services on health and lifestyle issues which may have negative impact on job performance. Now, I'll pause here a little bit to say that I think where this regulation is short is that it does not necessarily speaks to the well-being of the employee. It was primarily or is primarily focused on job performance and how health or lifestyle issues could affect that. And I think that there might need to be some review of that language to ensure that the employee assistance program should not solely be job performance driven, but should also be welfare driven, or at least an attempt to create some work-life balance as well. No? But fortunately for us, included in those health and lifestyle issues was the issue of occupational health, physical fitness, sexual transmitted disease, since of course we know there's discrimination where that is concerned, domestic violence. This is another area that I wish to point out that we will be looking at to provide for paid leave for victims of domestic violence, because currently, while we do have some consideration for compassionate leave, it does not necessarily encompass or is easily, domestic violence is not easily incorporated into that, and then it's limited. So we want to make a provision in our new regulations for domestic violence. There's the issue of mental health that is also incorporated, and so we're able to now, or public officers are able to utilize this to ensure that whenever there is any issues arising with their mental wellness, that they can access that service. Stress management, depression, substance abuse, and we've seen a lot of that. Violence in the workplace, not a whole lot to report there, but it does exist, especially threats, parenting skills, life skills, personal hygiene, and personal financial management. So those were the areas that were incorporated under this employee assistance program. And Part 2 of that regulation states that a public officer shall receive prompt medical attention and treatment that is available at any government health institution without any cost to that public officer. Now, this is primarily utilized, of course, when we speak of health in the purest sense. But considering the reality of today, that has expanded, of course, to mental health as well as the other assistance programs that are listed in Regulation 206. And those services are also provided free of cost, not necessarily at government health institution, but at private institution. The Ministry of Public Service bears the cost of any assistance that is sought by public officers in the Belize Public Service as it relates to any of these services. And so I am pleased to report that so far, the government continues to fund that program without any problems, and public officers who have chose to access any form of assistance listed here have been able to do so free of cost. The successes and challenges of the program, however, it's ongoing for 10 years, and I expect it to continue for another 10 years and beyond. There has been this successful outsourcing of professional services. As I stated, not all government health facilities provide all these services. So for the most part, I would dare say that close to outside of physical health, perhaps 90% of the services are contracted services by professionals and private institutions. It remains cost-free to public officers. It is confidential. And I placed an asterisk beside confidentiality because while it has been a confidential program, it has also caused some issues for the unit, in that the unit is located within the Ministry of Public Service physically. And the director has made a request for them to be relocated to a more isolated location, simply because of the stigma that comes behind seeking the assistance there. So currently, if I would want to seek any one of those services, I do not have to go to that office. I can simply call the office, speak with one of the representatives there, and then we set up a meeting point in Belmopan or in any one of the districts. So it is confidential, but like I said, if they were housed outside of a specific ministry, it would increase that confidentiality. So that is something that definitely anyone that is thinking about establishing a program would want to consider, to reduce the stigma associated with people seeing you going in and out of that specific unit. All services available are provided as per the PSR, as I stated, and Belize is made up of 7 districts, 7 municipalities, 6 districts, sorry, and 1 capital. And so we have an office in all those, we have offices in all those districts, and services are provided in all those districts, so people don't have to be traveling up and down or all over the country to access a specific type of service. And where necessary, the service provider goes into that district to provide the service to the public officer. The challenges that we have faced, however, with the program is that the department is not suitably staffed. Currently, we only have 3 trained professionals in there, and which of course lends to the idea that we have to outsource, because 3 persons would not be able to serve the entire public service. So hence the reason you see most of the services being outsourced. Apart from, of course, as I stated, some of the public health facilities would not be able to provide such professionalized services. There are budgetary constraints for greater outreach and sensitization, even as the program is in its 10th year. when you speak with public officers in certain districts or in certain regions, they would say to you that they have not been properly educated, or in some cases didn't even know that the service existed. And as a reason for that is, as explained by the director, there are budgetary constraints for them to do continuous outreach education and sensitization to public officers that this service is available. It's available free of cost, and they're free to reach out. And apart from that, as you would appreciate, perhaps because of the budgetary constraints, persons may not be able to enroll in a specific area of assistance or seek a specific service from a private contractor of these services because of cost. So the period for perhaps counseling or the period for whatever training might be given under whatever services that public officer is seeking might be limited to a specific period of time. So that is something that has to be looked at. Now, one of the challenges that the government has is the issue of accountability. As I stated earlier, the entire program is confidential, and so the government is unable to identify any public officer that accesses this program. For the current Minister of Public Service, he believes that this is a problem for him because he is, in his words, to paraphrase him, he's saying, look, we're allocating money. It is being spent within the unit as well as with the private providers. But I am unable to look at you, Dean Flores, and say, okay, I know you had a mental health issue, or I know you had a financial issue, or you had a substance abuse issue. And I can now look at you having accessed the service and you have improved. And so it's worth that we continue to invest in you and keep you in the public service. So that's an area that we're still trying to figure out. How can the program be accountable and transparent outside of simply giving people a number? At least for us, it's not an issue. For the government, it is an issue because they want to ensure that the people or the persons, the officers that are accessing the service are in fact benefiting, and that the public service is in fact benefiting by reduced tardiness, reduced absenteeism, or whatever other increased productivity, since of course that is impacted in case there's an issue. So we haven't figured out how we can perhaps recommend or what can be recommended to increase greater accountability for the government to be reassured that the program is worth the while. They know that it is worth the while. However, they would want to see much more information, and that continues to be a challenge for us. And that is something that I understand the director and her team are looking at, because this prohibits, or doesn't prohibit, but it hinders the Minister of Public Service from going back to cabinet to request much more support in terms of an increased budget, no? And so this is something that perhaps we can get some comments on as well in terms of how we can improve that from the experts that are here today. There is lack of disaggregated data with reference to the impact of the program, and I would have touched on that. There is no clear measurement that of the persons who have accessed the program, that in fact they are better off today. And also, as it relates to the different services that have been accessed, I noticed that the department had difficulty providing that to me. I was at least reassured, however, that they are compiling that data, and that the compilation of that data would have recently started because they recognized that they had to be much more transparency in terms of the data, in terms of sex, male, female, the age range, the different regions that perhaps is accessing the program more than others, and what were the factors or the issues or services that public officers were seeking most. While that information is available, it is not disaggregated and readily available for dissemination in a report. And so I've asked them to start looking at that, because as we continue with this program, we will have to start justifying this program to government for greater budgetary support by the cabinet. Another challenge that I find is voluntary enrollment and reluctance. We are here at the union would see a lot of public officers with several issues outside of mental health issues and including mental health issues. I think recently we've seen much more mental health issues post-COVID. But unfortunately, despite our advice to the officers to seek the assistance, not all of them have willingly accept that they need the assistance. And so, but we remain that we cannot and should not be forcing people to get assistance if it is not voluntary. So for me, that is a challenge. I don't see us lobbying for that to change, but I see us perhaps increasing our outreach, increasing our education, increasing our sensitization of the availability of the program, and for people to understand that it does not signal that you have a mental disorder. Stigmatization, of course, as I stated, the relocation of the office is being contemplated or is expected to occur in the very near future. And the fear of victims to document. Most people would not want to document what their issues are, whether it is sexual harassment. That's another area that the department is seeing. Substance abuse, domestic violence. Some of these services require reporting and feedback from the unit, from the employee assistance unit, is that most people would come for the assistance, but they do not wish to be documented into the system for whatever reason. No? These are the 4 top referral for services that were reported to me by the director and her team. Suicide, and this is very scary and should be scary for all of us, that suicide is your #1 referral. People contemplating to take their lives, and this could be as a result of everything else that follows below. But I wouldn't be able to say, okay, why exactly is suicide the highest rank referral services? As we all know, that could be tied to several other reasons. Grief and loss, depression, death of a loved one, financial management. The Belize Public Service is no different from I guess the other public services within the region. Public officers are not necessarily highly compensated, and with the ever increasing cost of living, with austerity measures that we all have to deal with from time to time when our economies aren't performing, we're the first group that the government would look at to implement any form of austerity. And so I can safely say that a lot of our public officers are barely keeping their head above water where meeting their financial obligations is concerned. And the matter of sexual harassment, this despite stronger legislation and a new campaign that my women's department is championing, is of course the ratification of C-190. And while the government of Belize has introduced and recently introduced a Sexual Harassment Act, for whatever reason, they continue to dodge the ratification of C-190. And so that is something that we're working on. But it's interesting that the matter of sexual harassment, despite greater education on it, greater encouragement to victims, both male and female, to report, there is a steady rise where that is concerned. I am being informed. What are the opportunities ahead of us? Well, as I stated, we have to figure out how we will improve accountability. We have some thoughts on that that need greater and further exploration. But that's an opportunity to get greater support from government to continue and to increase funding for the program. Better collection and disaggregation of data, a breakdown of sex, age, region, type of service, the impact. How has access to the service impacted on punctuality, productivity, mental health, and personal attendance and absenteeism? Data-driven decisions we all know that we're now in an era whereby if you're going to make a decision, you want it to be backed up by data rather than by emotions and how the group feels, no? Increase in budget allocation, there is an opportunity for that given the need for the services. And of course, we do expect an increase in the human resource allocations that has been made to the unit over the years. So definitely more staffing. Hopefully each district can have a staff readily available rather than having the current cadre of personnel who are actually physically located in Belmopan, having to travel to the district whenever the services are needed. Conclusion, mental health in the workplace is indeed a critical human rights issue. Public service unions, we are uniquely positioned to advocate for and protect the mental well-being of workers, and we rightly should, especially through our national centers. Incorporating an employee assistance program into a CBA, as we have done, demonstrates a holistic approach to employee welfare. It not only protects the interests of employees, but also contributes to the overall health and efficiency of the organization. Note of caution here, in our awareness and education campaigns to promote and protect mental health, we must learn that we cannot force someone to comprehend a message they are not ready to receive. And that's the kind of reluctance that we're seeing, right? So just bear in mind that just as you cannot force a flower to bloom before it's time, you cannot force somebody to understand the scope of what we're trying to do to assist the person holistically. And a quote from Noam Spencer, mental health is not a destination, but a process. We are currently in that process. It's about how you drive and not where you're going. So it will take some time before us, especially us Caribbean people, understand the importance of accessing these type of services and support without any shame. Thank you very much, and I hope that was short and sweet and to the point.
Thank you for that, Brother Dean. Yes, indeed, it was impactful. And, I listened to the experience in Belize and how the Belize PSU would have been integrally involved, particularly with regards to the welfare of its membership through the collective bargaining process and continuous advocacy and lobbying efforts. I zoom in a bit on the two last speakers because there is a means of how we can align the work that we do as trade unionists. And I do stress because we are that body, we are the labor movement. And I picked up, Brother Dean, in your presentation that you spoke about the intersectionalities. Really, how does the union consider the intersectionality of mental health? And we're talking about race, gender, and other factors in terms of our advocacy efforts. And you stressed a lot about the disaggregation of data because we have to understand how it impacts one gender, one race, age group, and all of that. So those things will inform how decisions are made. And that's where we have to get to. We have to get to that point where we have the data and statistics to drive the decision. So very, very informative presentation. I also zoomed in on those top referrals that you would have had based on data again, suicide being one of the main referrals in your country, and following that was the grief and loss, which has resulted in most what we see, depression. So we have our work cut out for us, and it's something now that regionally we have to work together to see how we can improve and push on this very important aspect of mental health. Mental health and wellness should not be seen as something on the fringe that, it's more welfare, but we have to have a holistic approach in how we treat with this through policy. So I thank you, Brother Dean, for your very informative presentation and for accepting to share your country's perspectives with us. I will now invite questions. I'm seeing hands, and I hope, Sister Helen, you can assist. I see my dear Sister Linda. Her hand is up, so I'll invite Sister Linda to comment at this time. Go ahead, Sister Linda.
Thank you, and good afternoon to you, comrades. I appreciated all of the speakers. I particularly liked the way that they gave us different perspectives on it. And I just wanted my intervention to be that oftentimes when we speak of mental health and the stress related to mental health, sometimes we speak on it outside of our actual executive officers, outside of our shop stewards, outside of our employees within our unions. And I think it's critical that we realize that the work that we do as unionists can be very stressful. And persons must also give us the same space to heal from our traumas related to our experiences that we go through in the work that we do too. And I don't think that we often get that sympathy and that empathy that we are expected to work through our traumas and continue the work of the members. And I think this is a flawed theory, and I would like to see us talk about that more as unionists, recognizing the humanity within us.
Thanks. Sister
Do
Tiffany.
appreciate that comment, Sister Linda, because and I just want to add, Brother Dean, before you speak, we tend to look after others as unionists. I have and we're all in the unions. We have our labor organizers or industrial relations officers who on a daily basis, it's like a 24-hour job that we have to listen and aid our members. We have the concerns, but who really looks after them? And I want to see where trade unions as an employer are the ones who, from a research perspective, we are best practice. Who knows more to deal with something that those who are experienced and who would have, from time to time been involved in these types of situations. So it's a very valid point, Sister Linda, that you have made, and I'm happy that you brought it to the fore. So I will allow Brother Dean to just comment on that.
Yes, I really want to thank Sister Linda for bringing that point up, because I had scripted as part of my introduction to touch on that, to simply ask the membership of the JCSC to give their executive the support and to be conscientious that they too are victims. And one of the speakers spoke about the fact that none of us are ever in a 100% continuous state of mental health, and that is true. And I could only imagine what it's like for bigger unions like the JCSC in terms of their leadership I could only imagine what they go through. Our public service is 16,000, but from a membership perspective, if you remove all your security personnel and so on and so forth, we're down to 6,000. And I can tell you that I personally, in my first year of the presidency, was personalizing all these issues. I took over the presidency immediately after COVID, and when austerity measures were being implemented, such as a 10% salary cut, a 3-year increment piece. So imagine your phone ringing off the hook with your membership telling you that they're not able to meet their bills, their children cannot go to school now because you cut me 10%. How am I supposed to survive when I'm living paycheck to paycheck? So that first year for me was tough, and I'm grateful that at least there was one member that I can recall clearly who called me and said, President, I'm checking on you. How is your mental state? Because I know you must be going through a lot. And it was true. We were sitting in negotiations with the government around this thing, sometimes for 12, 13 hours a day, trying to convince them otherwise. On top of that, people are just piling up on you. And so thanks for that, Sister Linda, because I really want to make the plea to the general membership that please do not just look at your executive, your presidents, her support team as robots. These people, like myself, we have families, and we're also burdened with our own personal responsibilities. And let's not take the attitude that we took that, well, hearing the list there and say, well, that you know on that. No, it's not that I wanted that. It's simply because we felt that, look, we want to serve, we want to assist, but that does not mean that you throw the human side of things, or that you take the human side of things out of us and think that we become cold individuals that don't have emotions, because we have the same emotions and we battle with the same challenges that you do. And in most cases, because we have to put up a front, we don't seek the assistance perhaps that we ourselves might be needed. So I'm really grateful for that comment, Sister Linda.
Thank you very much, Brother Dean. And I will now have my last feedback and wrap up from our second Vice President, Brother Kelvin. I'll invite you now to speak. He's on mute.
He's muted.
We're not hearing you, Brother Kelvin.
Yes, the moderator.
Oh, go ahead now.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Moderator. I must say that this was a very informative webinar, and we had 8 speakers, all of which would have brought their own unique perspective to the discussion, led by our president, Sister Tisha Clark-Griffiths, president of the Jamaica Civil Service Association. This would have been our first webinar of this nature, and we hope for it to be a series of similar webinars. Our president would have highlighted just the whole importance of mental health and how important it is based on our personal experiences with different challenges that our members would have had, in addition to our own personal experience with her family member or brother. Also, the whole issue of burnt out in the public service that we are accustomed to, emotional challenges, exhaustion from work, and a particular area that we know that would have caused several mental health challenges in the Jamaican context would have been the compensation review. And so, Madam President, you were able to highlight several different areas in which mental health can also affect persons in the form of absenteeism and decreased productivity. And also, I must highlight a particular thread that would have constantly been reiterated by our moderator is that we need to have a culture of care. That is one of the main areas that we need to inculcate from this webinar, is that we need to be very caring about how we treat each other in the workspace as it regards to mental health. We were able also to have Sister Jillian Corrodus, Director Industrial Relations from the Ministry of Labor, who from a labor standpoint was able to point out about us not having a broad brush approach when we're treating with persons within the workplace, especially as it regards to performance management, that persons may perform at different levels depending on their mental capacity, and therefore that needs to be taken into account because worker may vary and may have different challenges, different mental health challenges, which may cause one to perform differently from the other. And so sometimes this is something that needs also for the union to bring into discussion when we're negotiating, to have that aspect of our performance evaluation to be taken into account, and that for workers not to be treated all as one, but for the mental health capacity to be taken into account. So I believe that was a very vital point raised by Sister Corrodus. And also different things that can trigger mental health issues, which can be trauma and phobia. So that was just a synopsis of what Sister Corrodus was able to bring to the discussion. Also, Dr. Judith Liber Thomas, the Director of Child and Adolescent Mental Health in the Ministry of Health and Wellness, even though she spoke from an adolescent child perspective, it was very instructive to us as participants because it also educates us as to how important mental health is and how it can affect one from as early as childhood. And some of the things that we may be seeing persons manifesting now could be as a result of mental health histories that would have been developed from childhood. She would have, I think one of the main points that she really raised was just the three parts of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, which is really used for rational thinking and judgment, and the amygdala that is used for emotions. And just when persons are exposed to trauma, that there is a flip in the brain, and so less of the brain is focusing on cognition, right? And it's more focused on survival. And so people with trauma is not able to process things or be able to use their brain as effectively because their brain are mostly in a survival mode. These are things that would have caused us to be sensitized as to different situations in treating with mental illness. Also, she would have spoken about different areas that can cause or trigger mental illness. Our persons may be susceptible to mental illness from onset of childhood, impulse control disorders, substance use disorders, anxiety disorders, mood disorders, schizophrenia, and hyperactive and inattentive disorders. So that was, I must commend Dr. Judith Liber Thomas for that very informative from a scientific perspective in how we can actually be more sensitized about mental illness. Also, Sister Karen Grant Simmons from the Bermuda Public Service, she was able to just give her own experience about challenges in the public service, and that all of us are prone to mental illness or challenges with mental wellness in some way, form, or other, and that at no given day you will ever find any one of us at 100% fully at our mental capacity. And she would have spoken about just the old Bermuda experience and how they would have been able to sensitize just the workforce about workshops and seminars, monthly newspapers, collaboration, and other organizations that would have collaborated with on the whole topic of mental illness and mental illness awareness campaigns. I believe this is something that we in Jamaica will be able to imitate from the Bermuda experience, and found that very quite informative, and we're actually pleased at the work that is actually being done by the Bermuda Public Service Union. So 4 main areas that should have highlighted is high stress levels, right? Tight deadlines, being demanded of workers at work. And we can relate to this because in the workplace, especially when you have short staff, it does increase the stress level in the workplace and can cause burnout. Should have also spoken about stigma and trauma exposure, which would have been also highlighted in other presentations. Then we were able to have, from a legal standpoint, Camille Bennett, Sister Camille Bennett Campbell, attorney at law, and she brought it, her presentation was within the context of the Disabilities Act of 2014 and occupational safety and health from a Jamaican perspective. And she said the act came into effect in 2022. It spoke about persons with disabilities being entitled to fair and equal treatment as it regards to employment in the workplace. And she also highlighted that persons can seek redress within 2 years if they have been treated unfairly or dismissed. And they can seek redress to the Jamaica Council of Persons with Disability. And she would have spoken to the whole matter of workers being treated fairly. And she also pointed out that this is coming from Power, actually, that by the year 2030, we would see we'll actually lose $2.76 billion due to issues affecting persons with mental illness. So not mental illness, but mental well-being issues. And so that is a very serious thing that we need to pay careful attention to. And she also brought out that mental health and work are intertwined because we spend a significant amount of time in the workplace, which I can say our work sometimes is almost like our homes. And sometimes stresses that are caused from work can also translate into the workplace. And so it's very important for us to have our mental health being addressed. We also must commend Brother, let me see if I'm missing out anybody, Brother Dean Flores, who would have given us the Belize experience of the Employee Assistance Program. And I must say that I'm pleased because we see here where the Belize would have made amendments to their public service regulations, and we here in Jamaica is still in the process of amending ours. And what I'm particularly pleased is to see how they would have incorporated the Employee Assistance Program within their public service regulations. Even though we have the same identical program in Jamaica, it is not within the public service regulations. It is a standalone policy document within the Ministry of Finance. So I believe this is something that we can also adopt and ask for it to be incorporated into our public service regulations, and also the different conventions that they were able to have the ministry in which they would have had their own government be able to ratify ILO Convention 135, 154, 158, and 183. And just for the 10 years that the employee assistance program has been in effect, how successful it has been, and that it has been cost-free to public officers. And he emphasized the whole matter of confidentiality, and that all services available and provided as per the public service regulation. And this is something that I believe was very commendable. He also highlighted that suicide would have been one of the greatest incidents that they would have to be treating with. So all in all, I would say this was a very informative workshop, taking it from different perspectives. And I believe for the next one that we hope to have, we could have, I'm recommending that we may have a representative from our own employee assistance program here in Jamaica from the Ministry of Finance. We can have someone. And I also believe that we can also have a representative from the Jamaica Council of Persons with Disabilities. But all in all, I must say, this is our first, our inaugural, I would say, webinar on mental wellness. And I must say, it has been very informative. And I must say, it was well executed. And I must thank all the participants who were able to give their own perspective to it. It would have enriched and brought a lot of perspectives to the dialogue, which we hope to continue in consequent webinars. Thank you very much. Back to you, Madam Moderator.
Thank you, Brother Kelvin. And guess what? We are now at the end of our webinar. It has been a very productive one. We went a bit over time, but I must, on behalf of the President, officers, members of the executive, and our General Counsel, express gratitude and appreciation to our presenters for taking the time out to share with us, to inspire us. And of course, this topic, mental health, is all but one topic that we have to address as a trade union movement. I want to thank you all for joining us today for the important webinar on mental health, and as it is a fundamental human right. As we conclude our session, I take the moment to reflect on the insights and the discussions that we have had throughout our time together. First and foremost, it is clear, if it has never been clearer before, it is clear that mental health is not just an individual concern, but a community and societal issue. We have discussed the vital role that mental well-being plays on our overall health, productivity, and quality of life. And recognizing that mental health as its own challenges. We are dealing with humans. We are humans. We are brothers. We are sisters. We are neighbors. We have to have that culture of care. Today, we have heard from various experts who have shed their light on the current challenges faced. And of course, we have heard about the opportunities that we can zoom in or gain from those insights. The work has just begun. It will not end today at the close of this session, and we do take note that we have to work together, we have to collaborate, and we have to have training for our shop stewards and departmental representatives, as well as those within the various workplaces, so that all persons can be above board and be on board in dire times when our membership and our workers are in need. Brothers and sisters, thank you very much for staying on and for listening and giving the support. Warm greetings, blessings, one love. And we will share the presentations. We do have the email addresses, so we will share the presentations with those persons who would have registered. I thank you again. Enjoy your rest of evening. Thank you, Madam Treasurer. You did a wonderful job as well. Good evening, everyone. Bye-bye.
This webinar is now terminated. Be safe. Bye, guys.